Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Remained Quirkless and Got Trained by Almight Gran Torino to be No.1 Part 2. Before we start, please go support Zivings for writing that awesome fanfic. Chapter 28. Izuku walked into the dorms and saw Bakugo sitting on the couch. He was confused because the internships had started and he was supposed to be there. Kaken? Izuku blurted out, making the blonde boy look over to the door. What are you doing here, Deku? Bakugo asked, confused at the boy's return. Mr. Aizawa told me I could stay at the dorms since most of our internship work would be at U.A. Anyways, what about you? Aren't you supposed to be at an internship? Izuku shoots the question back. Well, yeah, but I was told I couldn't stay there overnight because of my attitude. Bakugo rolled his eyes a bit at the thought and looked back to the TV. Oh, hi, Midoriya. Todoroki walks back in the living room with a cup of tea in hand. Todoroki too? Izuku's eyes widen. I came back so Bakugo wouldn't be alone in a building where he can do anything he wanted. He sits down on the other couch and sips his tea. So you guys are at the same internship? Izuku asks while walking over to the couches. Yup, I'm at Endeavor's agency and so is he. Bakugo answers while crossing his hands behind his head. I invited him to join me because my Endeavor said to get someone from my class to intern with me. Todoroki tells Izuku, making Bakugo glare at him. That's cool. Izuku just nods awkwardly. Izuku walks over and sits down on the other end of the couch Bakugo was on. So how was the internship with Aizawa? Bakugo looked over to him. It was alright. You guys remember that guy from the sports festival? Shinso. Izuku asked the two. The one Uraraka beat up? Todoroki asked, making Bakugo almost burst out laughing. Oh yeah, the brainwashing freak. Bakugo dazed, reminded by Todoroki's comment. Izuku's sweat drops but nods. He's the only other guy in Aizawa's training, so it's kind of awkward. Izuku looks down at his bruised knuckle. Bakugo notices and looks at his bruised knuckle as well. What did you beat the crap out of him? Bakugo asks. Izuku chuckles. Yes, but no, we sparred and he didn't win a single round over hours of sparring. Izuku tells them. Bakugo laughs a bit and Todoroki smiles. At least you know you're still strong. Todoroki sipped his tea again. That's not it though, he made a remark afterward about why I was so good at sparring even though I had the explosion quirk. Izuku frowned. So you're pissed that he made a remark about something he had no clue about, since he didn't know you were quirkless until the USJ incident. Bakugo says, reading the situation surprisingly well. Exactly, actually. Izuku replies with a small chuckle. Easy fix, beat him up. Bakugo shrugs, making both Izuku and Shoto's sweat drop. There's the Kaken I remember. Izuku smiles and starts to laugh a bit. For real though. Don't let someone's ignorance bother you. He'll be the person he is and you don't have any obligation to get along with him. After all, you're just sparring partners for now. Bakugo says, looking away from the two and back to the TV. Izuku nods. I guess he's right. You could also try and make up with him. After all, he has the same goal as all of us, to become a hero. Shoto adds with Izuku nodding again. I guess I'll just have to explore my options. He says, getting up. Thanks guys, I'm gonna go take a walk, I'll see you later. Izuku waves at the two and leaves. Ochako and Mirio walk down the street. They had spent the day doing good deeds for people, such as helping them unload trucks, walk old ladies across the street, things along those lines. So how do you like it? Mirio asks as they turn a corner. It's nice, the feeling of helping someone who needs it. Ochako smiles and laughs. Suddenly Ochako feels someone run into her leg and looks down to see a silver-haired girl with tears in her eyes on the floor. She had band-aids all over. Ochako's eyes widen and she immediately squats down to her level. Hi, are you okay? Ochako asks while Mirio looks around for the girl's parents. Help me, the girl mutters while crying. The girl crawls over and puts her head on Ochako's chest. Ochako hugs the girl. What's your name? Ochako asks while looking at Mirio. Eri, she quietly answers. Eri, all right. Ochako pats her back. Please save me. Eri mumbles. Eri, a voice comes from the alley next to them where Eri ran out from. Eri almost yelps. Sir, is this your daughter? Mirio asks the man, who nods in response. Yes, now come on Eri, we have to go back home. The man calls to Eri, who squeezes on Ochako's costume. Ochako side-eyes Mirio, who smiles at her. We have to let her go back to her father. Ochako, let her go. Mirio smiles with sweat dripping down his face. Ochako looked back to Eri, who quickly let go of her hero costume and ran away back to the man in the alleyway. Thank you, heroes. The man smiled, but Ochako could tell it was fake. She clenched her fists as the man walked away with the girl. Once the two were out of view, Ochako looked at Mirio and stood up. Listen, Ochako. Ochako slapped him across the face before he could finish talking. Tears flowed down her face. She needed saving. Why did you send her back to him? Ochako scolded Mirio, who held his face and looked back at her. We're both on patrol. We have no right to follow a case we know nothing about. Mirio insists, making Ochako grit her teeth. She told me to save her. What if she's not alive by the time I can? Ochako was on the verge of panicking. Ochako, stop. Mirio grabbed her shoulders and held her still. Ochako stared him in the eyes and became angry. She used Black Whip to rip his hands off of her and walked away. If I'm not allowed to save a little girl who needs saving, then what the hell is even the point of being a hero anyway? Chapter 29. Sir, you have to let me fight. I found Eri there and she knows me. Ochako begged Night Eye. After Ochako and Mirio informed Night Eye of the Eri situation, a rescue mission was planned by Night Eye and other heroes. It took 2 weeks before being officialized. No, Ochako, you aren't a hero yet. You can't fight this battle, Night Eye tells her. Ochako grits her teeth. Then why the hell is Togata allowed to fight? How he's a 3rd year and just as much of a hero as I am. Ochako raises her voice. Ochako, Uraraka, you don't raise your voice at a hero. Almight scolds, making Ochako look over to him. Ochako scoffs. I thought out of anyone that at least you'd be on my side, but no, why would you be? Ochako growls before turning around and walking out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Ochako activates One for All, breaking the law with no care, and jumps onto the roof before using Black Whip to fling herself back toward Yue. Talk about being a real hero, you're nothing but a fake. Letting that girl suffer while you have a damn faculty meeting instead of saving her. Ochako thinks to herself as she uses Float to stay in the air and continue flying to Yue. Izuku was at Udade sparring with Aizawa. Izuku went for a kick on Aizawa's calf, but Aizawa jumped, avoiding the kick. While in the air, Aizawa rotated his body and kicked Izuku in the mouth before he could react. You're too slow, Aizawa says as Izuku quickly recovers and makes an X with his arms, blocking the incoming follow-up kick. Izuku quickly rotated his arm and grabbed Aizawa's leg, attempting to throw his teacher over his head and onto the ground. Instead, as he ripped Aizawa over him, Aizawa rotated his foot, kicking Izuku straight in the nose, and then turning his leg and placing it over his chest. Izuku lay on the floor with Aizawa on top of him, using his leg to keep him down. You lose, Aizawa said with a small smirk. Izuku breathed heavily and smiled. Good match, you've improved greatly, Aizawa said, getting up and offering a hand to him. Izuku took his hand and let Aizawa help him up. You guys are dismissed, good job today, Aizawa told the two. They both bowed and walked out of the room, not saying a word to one another. Izuku walked back to the dorms. Once inside, he walked to his room and opened it. He closed the door and turned around to be tackled into a hug. What the? Izuku, Ochako called him by his first name, surprising him. Ochako? What's wrong? Izuku hugs her back. Ochako had been at Night Eye's internship for the past 2 weeks and hadn't seen Izuku since. I hate it so much. Ochako breaks down crying. Izuku holds her up from falling. Ochako, what happened? Izuku becomes alarmed and walks her over to his bed, sitting her down. Ochako looks up at him and tries to calm down, but to no avail. They won't let me fight, they won't let me save someone. Ochako cried, and Izuku sat next to her, putting his legs on the bed and holding his arms out. Once again Ochako hugged him, the two laying down with Ochako's head on his chest. Who are you trying to fight? Izuku asks while caressing Ochako's hair. There was this girl, she said she needed saving, it was when I was on patrol, I want to save her and fight whoever I need to if I have to. Ochako sniffled, wrapped her hands around Izuku, basically crushing her own hands but not caring. She just wanted to hug him. And why won't they let you fight? And who is they? Izuku asks. They won't let me fight because I'm not a real hero and it's my dad and Night Eye. Ochako squeezes Izuku a bit. Izuku's eyes widen. He was surprised to hear All Might's refusal. I mean, if he was willing to destine his daughter against All for One, why not let her battle against someone else? Not a real hero? Izuku questions. Because I don't have a stupid hero license. Ochako sighs. Izuku doesn't say anything and just holds her close. I'm sorry, Ochako. I hate that this is happening to you. Izuku breaks the silence. Then help me. Ochako sits up and rolls off of Izuku and onto her feet. Izuku sits up. How? He asks her as she smiles. I have an idea. The next day was the raid. Ochako brought Izuku to her room that night. What am I doing here? Izuku asked as Ochako closed the door. You're sleeping here, Ochako says with Izuku's face immediately bursting into a blush. What? He says, backing up and knocking into the door. Tomorrow when we wake up I'll leave early and you'll sleep here. When someone comes to check on me they'll see you under the covers and think it's me trying to hide, Ochako says with a huge smile on her face. Then I can sneak into the raid and save the girl, Ochako finished while laying back on her bed. Oh, okay. Izuku thought to himself, devising a way from the naughty thoughts in his mind. Sound good to you? Ochako looks over to Izuku, who smiles and nods. Yeah, it's good, he says before Ochako walks over and grabs his hand. Thank you, Izuku, seriously. Ochako looks him in the eyes. Wait a minute. She scrunches her eyebrows. How do you have two eyes? She almost yells at him. Izuku chuckles. When the internship started, May Hatsum finished making this. It's awesome. Izuku touches the eye and Ochako cringes, imagining how it would feel if she did that to her eye. That's good. Ochako smiled. Izuku nodded. The two stood in an awkward silence, still face to face. Hey, Ochako mumbled while getting a little closer to Izuku. Yeah? He questioned as she kept getting closer. See, can you kiss me? Ochako blushes and closes her eyes. Izuku was baffled at this request. They hadn't kissed since the night they made it official, which had to be around 3 months ago. Izuku cleared his throat. Yeah, I can. Izuku slowly raised his hand and put it on her cheek. Izuku slowly closed the distance, and saw Ochako's face get more red as he got closer. Izuku smiled, realizing she was just as nervous as he was. I love you. Izuku smiles at her, and she opens her eyes. It was the first time he had said it to her. When Izuku first asked her to be with him, he never said it back. And when he did say it back, it was only right after he had returned from being captured by the villains. So hearing it from him first made her feel butterflies in her stomach. I love you too so much. She leaned in and kissed him. Once the kiss ended, Ochako leaned back and smiled at Izuku, who was blushing at her. I forgot how much I liked kissing you, Izuku mumbled before clapping his hands on his mouth. Ochako snorted. Guess we'll have to do it more often then, she flirted with a smirk. Izuku chuckled. I guess so, he says before Ochako grabs his sleeve and drags him back to her bed. Wait, aren't we? Don't get the wrong idea, we aren't gonna do that, but I liked laying with you earlier, so I wanna do it again. Ochako giggles with a blush on her face. Izuku breathes a sigh of relief and lays down with her. By the time you wake up tomorrow I'll be gone, so I'll see you after I save her. I'll probably be on house arrest though. Ochako nervously sighed while snuggling up to Izuku. As long as you save that girl and don't die, then I'll be fine. Izuku smiles and holds her close. The next day would change everything. Chapter 30. Ochako jumped from building to building before landing in front of a huge building. The Shai Hasaikai compound. Ochako thought to herself as she saw the heroes surround the entrance to the building. She watched as the heroes in the surrounding area evacuated people. This is big, Ochako thought to herself as she watched Kirishima and Fat Gum walk in the building. So it was a throwaway answer. Ochako thought back to Night Eye talking about how Ochako wasn't qualified. Ochako grit her teeth and squeezed down on her shirt collar. She was completely covered in a black outfit besides her pink support items. She had a black mask on resembling Izuku's mask from his hero costume. The raid started and Ochako jumped onto the top of the compound. She knew her father was part of the raid, but with how little of One for All was probably left, she felt like he'd be more of a liability. Of course her father didn't think that. He was still under the impression that he was the strongest. He was wrong. The now empty part of the city was lifeless. Ochako could feel her stomach then as she thought of what could be happening to that girl. What if she was too late? Ochako jumped down and snuck past a few heroes keep guard, each falling down unconscious. Thanks Izuku, she looks at her hand that she just used to knock them out. Izuku had taught her a technique to use for that exact moment. They'll be awake soon, hopefully no one finds them. Ochako ran into the building and saw someone standing at the edge of a staircase. He had white long hair and was sickly pale. What's the plan, sir? A familiar voice asked with the white-haired man laughing. Oh no, Ochako peeked her head around the corner and saw a beefed-up Shigaraki and Kurojiri. We wait for the heroes to save that girl, then I turn this place to dust. Shigaraki laughs. We need that girl, right? Dalby asks while sitting in an office chair. No, we just need her quirk, and with my new powers. Shigaraki looks at the palm of his hand to see a hole. That shouldn't be a problem. He grins. Ochako's eyes widen. He has all for one. Suddenly a huge crash is heard below them. The whole building shakes and Ochako loses her balance, falling right behind League. Shigaraki and Dalby turn around. Who the hell? Both Shigaraki and Dalby recognize Ochako and smirk. Ochako, right? Shigaraki says, asking her to confirm her name. Ochako said nothing and rolled backward onto her feet. Shit. Shigaraki put his hand up. Perish. Ochako instinctively activated smokescreen and avoided the punch coming at her using danger sense. This is bad. Ochako looked down at the floor. She breathed in heavily. Smash. The floor below her burst into pieces and she started falling. What the hell was that? Ochako heard All Might's voice ask. Dad, we have to R. Ochako got punched in the gut and sent flying into a wall. Shut up, rat. This was supposed to be a quiet mission. Shigaraki glares at her. All Might looked at Ochako, and then Shigaraki. Behind All Might stood Mirio fighting Chisaki. All Might, a little help. Mirio used permeation to dodge the tendrils of Overhaul flying at him. This is really bad. Ochako notices Shigaraki look at Eri. Shigaraki pounces, but Ochako grabs him with Black Whip. I won't let you hurt her. Ochako yells, gritting her teeth and trying to keep her footing. Shigaraki turns back to her. You really are such a nuisance. Shigaraki flies at Ochako with his palm out ready to take her quirk. Ochako's eyes widened, but before Shigaraki could hit her, All Might jumped in and punched Shigaraki into a wall. Capture him. All Might ordered. Ochako wrapped Shigaraki fully in Black Whip, but he easily broke out. That's not gonna work on me, Shigaraki says with an unimpressed expression. Shigaraki puts out his hand and Ochako's eyes widen as he nears the ground. All of a sudden Shigaraki looks back at his hand. Why won't it work? He growls before looking over to the heroes and smiling. Ochako looks back and sees Aizawa with his quirk activated. Shigaraki smiles. Eraserhead, you're still so cool. His voice shakes as instead of decay a tendril appears from his hand and he shoots it at Aizawa. All Might grabs Aizawa and jumps out of the way. Shigaraki looks back to where Ochako was and sees nothing. Where'd that brat go? Shigaraki smiles. They should be here soon. Shigaraki continues to smile and almost burst into laughter. Back at Udata, Todoroki went to wake up Izuku. Once he found he wasn't in his room, he was very confused. He decided to go ask Ochako, but when he went to knock on her door, it opened. All that was in the room was a note on her nightstand. He picked it up, and as he read it, his eyes widened. No way. Back at the battle, Overhaul and Mirio were both on their last legs. Eri sat astonished at the power in the building. Ochako had grabbed her and hid behind a big pile of ruble. "Save me, please!" she cried while Ochako did burpees and squats. "I will, don't worry, Eri." Ochako stopped and stood up, looking over the ruble. "Third, I hope this works," she says to the vestiges. "There's a good chance it won't, but if you don't try, you and everyone here will die," the third told her as sweat dripped down Ochako's head. "Second, we could really use you right now," Yoichi, the first user, says, with the second hesitating. Since Shigaraki had revealed that he was there, other heroes had been called to action. Endeavor appeared and immediately started a clash with Dabi, who had been mostly dormant since they fell through the building. Ochako looked at Eri and smiled. "You'll be okay, I promise I'll save you," Ochako told her before a huge crash was heard. Ochako peeked out again and felt her heart sink. Izuku stood with flames coming out of his side and a devious grin. Chapter 31. Young Midoriya, All Might yelled at the sight of Izuku. While the others didn't notice it, Ochako did. The expression on Izuku's face was one he's never made before. Shigaraki smirked at the sight of him. "You're finally here." Shigaraki walked toward Izuku and Izuku walked to him. "You got master's orders, yes?" Shigaraki asks him as Izuku nods. "Kill them all." Izuku maniacally laughs. Aizawa and All Might were in shock. "Midoriya, what are you doing?" Aizawa yelled before feeling the air leave his body. Izuku appeared in front of him and kicked him back into a wall. Aizawa's human nature caused him to close his eyes, and Shigaraki regained use of decay, immediately attempting to use it on the ground. Ochako uses Black Whip to lift him up, and Izuku looked over to her with a grin. "Uraraka, I'll finally kill you!" Izuku ran at her and used his explosions to try and blow her up. Ochako used Float to avoid Izuku and made a cocoon-like structure around Eri using Black Whip. "Izuku, what are you doing?" she yelled as Izuku used his explosions to shoot himself into the air. "Doing what I should have a long time ago," he says as he's scratching toward Ochako, barely drawing blood from her cheek. Ochako feels tears threaten to leave eyes but grits her teeth. "What's wrong with you?" Red energy starts to form at Ochako's feet. Fa Jean Fo 100%. Ochako blitzes at Izuku midair and kicks him into the ruble. She looks back at Shigaraki, who is uncontrollably laughing. Ochako grit her teeth and wrapped Black Whip around her arms and legs. She shot herself at Shigaraki and punched him in the face. Blood spewed everywhere from Shigaraki, but he continued to laugh. Ochako turns back and shoots herself at him again. "You can't kill me if you tried." Shigaraki turns around and punching Ochako in the gut as she was flying at him. Ochako almost folds in half and goes straight down to the ground, subconsciously turning off all of her quirks. Shigaraki fell to the ground but landed on his feet. He smiled and put his hands on the ground, but once again decay didn't work. Shigaraki instantly glared over to Aizawa, who was almost completely submerged under rubble, but still had his eye open on Shigaraki. Shigaraki stood back up and slowly walked toward Aizawa. "This will have been a long time coming, Eraserhead." Claws appear on the edge of Shigaraki's hands. Suddenly he stopped in place. Shigaraki looks down to his chest and sees string-like lines ripping into his skin. He slowly turns his head and sees Best Jeanist, the number 3 hero, standing at the top of the hole that Ochako originally created to get into the battlefield. Behind Jeanist was the newly crowned number 4 hero, Hawks. Hawks flew in and grabbed Eri before flying back out before anyone can stop him. "Got the girl." Hawks looks at Eri, who is beyond terrified. "Don't worry, little one, we're here to save you." Hawks puts his hand out, and Eri grabs it after hesitating. Shigaraki glares up at the 2 top heroes. "She's supposed to be mine." Shigaraki rips Jeanist fiber off of him and jumps up, flying at the 2. Ochako jumps up and catapults herself using Black Whip. She smashes into Shigaraki's back and jumps off of him and up to Eri. I won't let you use my quirk, but I'll give you some advice. The second user says to Ochako as she nears the two top heroes. A quirk that rewinds you can stop you from being hurt if you have a constant source of something that will hurt you, he says before disappearing. Eri, I need your help. Ochako ran up to her. I can help? The girl seemed surprised. Ochako nodded. I need you to use your quirk on me. Ochako kneels over. Get on my back and hold on tight. The two top heroes look at Ochako. What's your plan? Hawks asks, confused. My power hurts me. If Eri uses her quirk on me, then I can use the power that hurts me without it actually hurting me, since she'll reverse the effects. Ochako explains. Eri nervously gets on Ochako's back. Okay, I'm ready, she lightly says. Ochako smirks as a yellow light starts to surround them. Ochako feels pain rip through her entire body. She cringes before activating 100% of One for All. Full power, Ochako smirks and looks down into the battlefield. She jumps down and lands on Shigaraki's back, who was still laying down. She hears a snap along with Shigaraki gasping for air. You won't beat me! Ochako stomps on Shigaraki's head, desperate to kill him. Suddenly a small boy who resembles Shigaraki appears in her mind, surrounded by hands. Save him, a voice says, with Ochako snapping back to reality, being kicked in the side and sent flying. Eri barely held on. Ochako looks over to see Izuku breathing heavily. He had been fighting All Might and barely made it out alive. He had blood dripping down his face and a very clearly broken right arm. Ochako flashed back to the USJ and the stain incident. But it was different now. Izuku was the enemy. Izuku, please don't do this, Ochako begged, with Izuku wiping blood off of his mouth. Izuku jumped at her, and she dodged. Izuku, please, what happened? Why are you like this? Izuku didn't answer, and wildly threw his hands at Ochako. Something ticked in Ochako's mind. This isn't Izuku, she thinks to herself while grabbing his wrist and flipping him over her and into the ground. His fighting style was abnormal. He didn't use any of his martial arts training. Ochako used Black Whip to pin Izuku to the ground. She got on top of him and punched him as hard as she could in his face. Whoever you are, I won't let you ruin his name, she yelled, hitting him again, knocking him out. Ochako's danger sense goes off, but before she can react, she's sent flying into a wall, barely blocking it from hitting Eri. Daobi, come here, we're retreating. Shigaraki grabbed Izuku's unconscious body and started to fly up. Chase him, All Might yelled before a shockwave of energy pummeled him back into a wall. All of the heroes' stomachs turned as a masked man floated down toward the heroes. I advise you let them go, All for One told all of the heroes as Daobi let Shigaraki grab onto him. All for One, All Might grit his teeth. It's a shame I couldn't get my hands on Rewind, but I got something even better. Izuku Midoriya is on my side now, and no one can change his mind on that. All for One looks over to Ochako and smirks. Not even his little girlfriend. All for One disappears. A wall bursts open and Mirio flies through it. A small bullet hole in his leg makes Ochako's heart sink. He shot me and got my quirk, Mirio yells out. The hero's focus was back to Overhaul. Ochako felt Eri's grip on her back tighten. Don't worry, Eri, I won't let him hurt you anymore. Ochako tries to stay focused. Ochako blitzes at Overhaul and punches him in the face, sending him flying back into the other room that him and Mirio were in. All Might watches in awe as Ochako almost easily beats up Overhaul. Night Eye watches with a hole in his chest. While fighting with Mirio, he tried to tell the future of Overhaul but paid the price. In the vision, he saw everyone dead. Night Eye's heart rate slowed. Kirishima ran up and tried to help Night Eye. Ochako flew up above Overhaul and used Black Whip to deflect his quirk. You heard Yari, I won't let you get away with that. Ochako flew down and cranked her arm back. All of the emotions that had built up, seeing Izuku as an enemy, Shigaraki almost killing her, All for One's presence, it terrified her, but it also enraged her. Ochako smashed Overhaul on the face as hard as she could. His quirk started to explode around him, and he shot to the ground barely alive. Night-Eye's eyes widened as he looked at Ochako. She defied fate, Night-Eye thought to himself before falling back to the floor. Sir Night-Eye, Mirio looked over and saw his master on the ground bleeding from his mouth. Mirio ran over and kneeled onto the ground. No, I'm so sorry, Sir Eye. Night-Eye put a hand on his face and used his quirk. Night-Eye saw Mirio as a top hero, and he smiled. You're the best student I could have asked for, a million, Night-Eye said as Ochako ran up to them. And Night-Eye, Ochako kneeled down as well. Night-Eye coughed up more blood. Ochako, he started as the other heroes started to surround him. I'm sorry I doubted your ability. During your fight with that white-haired man, my foresight told me you would die, but you lived, and you beat Overhaul and saved Eri. Night-Eye smiles and closes his eyes. You proved my quirk wrong. Ochako's eyes widened. You proved fate wrong. Night-Eye opened his eyes. You'll both become amazing heroes, he thought to himself as the life in his eyes left his body. Both Mirio and Ochako burst into tears. Uncle Sasaki and no! Ochako screamed. Night-Eye. Chapter 32. Bakugo walked into the dorms to see almost every student there. Bakugo, big news, Kaminari says as Bakugo walks over to everyone. What is it? Bakugo asked as he looked over to see Todoroki holding a note. Bakugo walked up and ripped the note out of his hand. I have found my calling. Heroes aren't for me. I will kill them, and sometime I'll kill you all. Under it was another small message. If you come and find me, I'll kill you even sooner. Bakugo grit his teeth and dropped the note. That bastard, Bakugo said. The other agreed, but they didn't know Bakugo wasn't talking about Izuku. The dorm door opened and everyone looked over to see Ochako. They had never seen her like this though. Her hero costume was close to fully destroyed and she had tear marks on her face. She wasn't smiling like she usually was. She looked blank. Ochako, the girl said, noticing her demeanor. Not only had she lost Izuku, but she lost Night-Eye. Ochako glanced over at the group. Did you hear Izuku went rogue? Mina yelled with Ochako gritting her teeth and instinctively using one for all, while punching a wall. The wall crumbled and Ochako looked at what she had done. Her mind was all over the place, and she ran upstairs to her room. The class stood in shock, all but Bakugo. Bakugo walks over to the stairs. Bakugo, you shouldn't. Momo goes to stop him but is held back by Todoroki. Let him do as he pleases, Todoroki told the girl with Bakugo looking back at him, his eyes saying thank you. Bakugo went upstairs to her room and knocked on the door. What do you want? Ochako answered, sitting on the floor on the opposite side of the door. Uraraka, please open the door, Bakugo pleaded, making Ochako surprised. Ochako got up and turned around. What do you want, Bakugo? She asked him, not opening the door. We need to talk about Deku, Bakugo says, trying to open the door. It was locked. It doesn't matter, Bakugo. I saw him myself, he's gone. All for One gave his quirks back and he's fully gone. What's the point anymore? I got expelled from U.A. I lost my boyfriend, I lost my uncle, what's the point? Bakugo heard Ochako punch her door. Please let me in, Bakugo mumbled. The door finally opened and Bakugo was met with Ochako with tears flowing down her face. Bakugo frowned, the first time Ochako had seen him do so. Let's sit down, Bakugo told her. Ochako nodded and walked over to her bed, sitting down. Bakugo closed the door. So you're expelled, Bakugo started while sitting down at Ochako's desk. Ochako nodded as more tears welled up in her eyes. Bakugo sighed. What did you do? Bakugo asks while looking at her costume. I joined a raid I wasn't part of, technically an act of vigilantism, Ochako said while sniffling. Bakugo's eyes widened. Why the hell? He started before Ochako cut him off. Shut up, shut the hell up. She looked at him with a glare and her teeth raring like she was gonna pounce on him at any moment and attack. Listen, there was this girl I found at my internship while I was on patrol A and I wanted to save her. She asked me to save her, but then Ochako paused. She couldn't explain herself, not without exposing her secret. She started to bawl her eyes out again. I was selfish, and maybe if I wasn't, Izuku would still be here right now. Ochako cried with Bakugo clenching his fists. Oh, come on! Bakugo burst out, surprising Ochako. You really think that nerd would do that? Seriously? Bakugo grit his teeth and sat up in his chair. That kid wouldn't kill anyone if he was forced to. You should know that. You really think he'd leave this life behind? Hasn't he told you he loves you? Ochako immediately thinks back to the night before Izuku finally said it first. Ochako also thought back to earlier. He called me Uraraka. It isn't him. I deduced that when I was fighting him. Ochako mumbles with Bakugo's eyes widening. You fought him? Bakugo screamed out. Ochako nodded. It wasn't really him. He called me Uraraka, and he only calls me Ochako, and his fighting style was completely different. Ochako urgently tells Bakugo. The real Deku is out there. Bakugo smirks. Now that I'm not a hero student, I think I can find him. Ochako smirked as she went to her closet and revealed her real hero costume. This was a temporary one as I didn't plan to get caught. But if I'm out of here, then I'm gonna do what I want. Ochako laughed to herself. Listen, I won't leave you. But I'll help. Whenever you need a support item, I'll get it built for me and then you can take it. Bakugo feels dirty breaking the law or assisting in doing so, but to find Izuku he would do it. Ochako smiles and punching her own palm. I'll find Izuku, and I'll get my revenge on the League of Villains. Ochako looks at her window and turns to Bakugo. Don't tell the others, okay? She tells him. Bakugo smirks. Like hell I'd snitch. Now go. I'll act like you wouldn't open the door and I couldn't find you. Ochako smiled at him and nodded before grabbing her hero costume and phone and jumping out of the window. Izuku woke up in a dark room. He looked around. Where am I? He mumbled. A laugh could be heard from the other side of the room. A blonde girl walked up to him. Izuku, she cooed with a murderous grin. Who the hell are you? Izuku tried to move but realized he was tied down. The girl suddenly transformed into Izuku. I'm you, silly. She laughed with a huge blush on her face. Izuku's eyes widened. How the hell? Izuku thought to himself. The door to the room opened, and in walked a familiar faceless man. Izuku Midoriya. You've served your purpose. I truly do thank you. You were dumb enough to go back to U.A after I released you. All for One laughed. I chipped you, and heard everything that happened the 2 months you were out. Every conversation with your friends, and even your little girlfriend. The 9th user of One for All. All for One grinned at Izuku, who was horrified. So seriously, young Midoriya, thank you. All for One mocks All Might and Izuku grits his teeth. What the hell do you want from me? The boy yells while struggling. Oh, you serve no purpose anymore but to be bait for the 9th. All for One tells him. I knew her plan to join the Shai Hasaikai hideout raid because of the chipping you, and I knew you'd be alone, so either Tamura got rewind and I captured you, being the best case scenario, or the worst being I only get you. Fortunately for you it was the latter. All for One circles the table. Izuku is strapped too. You're in a romantic relationship with her, and she would do anything to save you, right? Even challenged me before she even has access to One for All's full power. Now I can't act as if I expected the former user's quirks to emerge from her, but if I have the mental leg up. All for One turned around and walked toward the door, stopping in the frame. Then taking that quirk will be easier than ever. Chapter 33. One for All. Ochako smirked while looking at the villain in front of her. She cranked her arm back as red energy fleed her legs. Foe 100%. She slammed the giant villain in the side of the head and knocked it unconscious. She fell back down on top of the building she had been on previously and deactivated FA Gene. It had been 2 years since Izuku was captured. The now 17-year-old Ochako had been a vigilante since. Bakugo was a third year in U.A along with the rest of former Class 1A. She breathed in heavily and smirked as heroes surrounded her. Ochako Uraraka, you're under arrest. Kamui Woods yelled at the girl. She shrugged and fell back off the building. Fifth Ochako held out her hands and black whip attached to the top of the building. Third Ochako's legs turned a bright red as energy flowed. Hey Woods, you're getting a bit old, aren't ya? Maybe go chase the slower ones. Ochako yells to the hero before catapulting herself away. Kamui looked at Ochako as she flew away. But I've only been a hero for 3 years, Woods thought to himself. Ochako flew through the air with a smile on her face. In the past 2 years she had become known around the country as a vigilante. She hadn't seen her father in months, and even when she did, he almost denounced her. He was incredibly disappointed. No one but her and Bakugo believed Izuku was innocent. Only one more person. The boy's mother herself, Izuku Midoriya. Ochako neared her hideout. Hopefully she's home. Ochako wiped sweat off of her head as she quickly changed into normal clothes. She got a buzz cut to avoid suspicions in her day-to-day life. As long as it wasn't All Might or her mother who saw her, no one recognized her. Ochako entered Inko's apartment. I'm home, she yelled out, looking around the apartment. Inko? Ochako took her wig off. It was identical to how her hair used to be. A pit grew in her stomach. Oh, hi, sweetie. Inko walks out of the bathroom with a smile and a wave. Ochako breathed a sigh of relief. Ever since the overhaul incident, she had been hyper-paranoid. Good evening, Ochako. How was your patrol? Inko asked as she started to fold towels. It was good. Fought some big guys today, so it was fun. Ochako smiled while walking over to Inko. She hugged the older woman. How was your day? She asked Inko. It was great. Inko broke the hug and continued to fold the towels. Any updates on All for One? Inko asked, with Ochako shaking her head no. I've been trying to find leads, but there's nothing. Ochako sighs. Bakugo had discussed that Ochako needed a place to stay, and since All Might and Ochako's mom moved back to their mansion full-time now that Ochako wasn't in Udade, Ochako was free to live with Inko without being caught. A few months after the girl moved in with Inko, she ended up coming home with blood dripping down her face and a gash through her stomach. Inko decided she should stop going after Izuku. That's when Ochako decided it was time to explain one for all and the reason she's so dead set on getting Izuku back and then revenge on the League. What about Izuku? Inko got a bit quiet, hoping for good news. Ochako looked down. Nothing, she told the woman. Inko sighed. I still have faith, you know, Inko says while she finishes folding the last towel. I do too, Inko, and don't worry, I'll find him. Even if it's the last thing I do, I will find him. Ochako puts a hand on Inko's shoulder and Inko just smiles. Then I'm looking forward to seeing my son again someday. Inko starts to walk back to the bathroom to put the towels away. Ochako feels her phone buzz from her pocket and pulls it out to see a text from Bakugo. She immediately starts a call and walks into Izuku's old room, which is now her room. Hello? Bakugo answers the phone. Hey, what's going on? Ochako asks while sitting down at her desk. There's a mission. We're raiding another Yakuza hideout. You have my location and it'll be at 6:30 a.m. tomorrow morning, Bakugo quietly said before hanging up. Ochako smiled and put her phone back in her pocket. Even though she defeated Overhaul 2 years ago with ease, the Yakuza in Japan had seen it as a declaration of war. They wanted their territory back, but Ochako wasn't gonna let that happen, nor were the heroes. A lot of Yakuza members had connections to the League, so whenever there was a raid, Ochako was sure to show up in one form or another, either fighting the Yakuza or watching from afar. Ochako walked back out of her room and saw Inko on the couch watching TV. Inko, tomorrow there's a mission at 6:30, so I won't be here when you wake up, okay? Ochako tells the woman. More Yakuza? Inko asks as she stands up. Yup, Ochako nods. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Inko smiled and walked toward the kitchen. You want food? Ochako smiles and nods. Izuku stood with a blank expression on his face. He had been in captivity and barely let outside or able to interact with other people besides the League. Izuku Midoriya, enter my office now. All for One's voice echoes throughout his head. All for One forcefully gave him a telepathy quirk a little over a year into his captivity so he could summon the boy. Izuku had also got his quirks back, but he had no reason to use them. He was even pretty sure he unlocked more quirks as time went by. He stumbled into All for One's office. Yes, master. Izuku looked as if he was going to collapse. Toga is going to need more of your blood for an operation tomorrow, All for One tells the boy. When this first started, Izuku would cry while getting the blood taken because he knew his name was being tarnished and his power was being used to hurt people. Now, he didn't react at all, so numb to the pain of it all. He had accepted he was going to die in control of All for One. He had no idea Ochako was looking for him. He thought she forgot about him after Toga fought her using his powers. Toga walked up to him with a smile. Zuku. Toga blushes and a machine on her back stabs Izuku in the leg. He doesn't react at all, no expression on his face as blood is drained from him. Izuku felt himself become lightheaded as more blood was drained from him. Soon enough he became too weak to stand, he toppled over onto the ground. He stared at the wall in front of him as he slowly lost consciousness. Chapter 34. Ochako walked up to a building and looked up at it. Usually Yakuza are more discreet, she thinks to herself while looking at the huge building. She heard explosions inside and checked the clock. It was 7:15 a.m. I'm a bit late, but whatever, she thinks to herself while jumping onto the side of the building. She holds onto a windowsill and attaches Black Whip to the top of the building. She flings herself up and lands on the top. Let's join the fight. Ochako raises her fists and is about to destroy the roof but is tackled away and into another building. She crashes through the windows and is in the middle of an office. Everyone evacuate, she yells to the office workers before she's kicked in the jaw. She looks up and sees Izuku with a grin on his face. Ochako Uraraka, good to see you again, Izuku says while clenching his fists. Wish I could say the same. Ochako grits her teeth. Ochako uses Black Whip to push herself off of the ground and out of the way of a punch from Izuku. Ugh, damn you! Ochako grabs a desk and throws it at Izuku, who breaks it in half using an explosion. Once the desk is destroyed, Izuku looks around the room. He looks down and sees his foot with Black Whip gripping on his ankle. Ochako slams him into the floor and he bounces up. This isn't where the fighting was supposed to be. Ochako grits her teeth and grabs Izuku before throwing him into the building where the heroes were fighting the Yakuza. She catapults herself after him using Black Whip and the two fly into the building, crashing through a wall. Once the smoke clears, Ochako looks around and sees heroes. Izuku was up against a wall with a glass shard in his arm. Blood spewed out of him and he seemed to panic. Slowly his face started to change. Ochako's eyes widened as another person's eye appeared on his face. I was right, she thought to herself. Izuku grit his teeth and went to run away, but Bakugo blasted him in the side of the head with an explosion. Stay down, Bakugo held his gauntlet against Izuku's head. Izuku just laughed, it seemed as if he couldn't stop. Ochako Uraraka, Ochako looked over and saw her father standing there. Dad, Ochako tried to activate the base power of One for All, but it wouldn't work. She looked behind her father and saw Aizawa with his eyes red. Don't stop my quirk, stop his. Ochako pointed to Izuku, who had a smile on his face. Katsuki Bakugo, right? Your quirk is explosion. Izuku's laughter becomes louder. Let's see how you like it. Izuku's body starts becoming orange. Get down, Ochako yells while trying to cover everyone with Black Whip. Izuku's body explodes and the whole building along with it. Ochako feels a ring in her ear as Black Whip retracts. Fire is all around and she looks over to the heroes, who she luckily protected using Black Whip. All but one. Bakugo stood still over where Izuku was. He was barely alive. The blast completely taking off his left arm. Bakugo, Ochako ran over to him before looking down to where his feet are. There lay Izuku with his skeleton showing. He laughed as regeneration brought his body back to normal. This wasn't the normal regeneration that Izuku had unlocked back when he was 15, but it was the super regeneration used by All for One and Shigaraki. Izuku stood up. I guess you guys are lucky, right? Izuku's face started to melt, and suddenly he stopped talking. No, he mumbled before his body completely reverted. There stood Toga in full view of the heroes. Ochako's eyes widened. Where's Izuku? Ochako yelled at the girl while tackling her to the ground. The girl laughs and blushes. Ochako feels a sharp pain, looks down to her leg to see blood being drained from her. What the hell? Ochako punches the girl in the face and rips the machine off of her. What is this? Where's Izuku? Ochako shoots questions at her as Bakugo stands there still bleeding. Ochako grabs her collar, but the girl just smiles again. So you're the Ochako he talked about back then? Toga giggled. Ochako got mad and grabbed her neck. I should kill you! She started raising her voice. Toga didn't stop smiling. Almight ran up and grabbed Ochako, ripping her off of Toga. He looked at Toga and then Ochako. Ochako, this isn't Midoriya, Almight says with Ochako looking at him and slapping him in the face. I told you. Ochako looks back to Toga and she starts to get up. You're under arrest. Aizawa stops her quirk, and she stands there with blood all over her body. Ochako looks to Aizawa and hesitates before running at him and kicking him in the face using one for all. Ochako, what the hell? All might look at his daughter as she attacks her former teacher. Toga uses the opportunity to jump out of the building with Shigaraki appearing below her to save her from falling to her death. Ochako looks down at Aizawa, who grits his teeth at the girl. All forces, he says to the rest of the heroes. Capture the villain. Aizawa start with Ochako's eyes widening. Ochako Uraraka. Ochako turns to see All Might swinging at her, and she dodges. Dad, let me explain, Ochako pleaded while dodging attacks from him and all the other heroes. Ochako looked over and saw Bakugo start to collapse. Her heart sank and she looks back to her father and the other heroes. Help Bakugo, he's dying, she screams at them. She sees Shoto and Momo run toward Bakugo as Bakugo falls onto his back. Dad, please. Ochako clenches her fists and activates FA gene in her arm before punching All Might in the jaw, almost knocking him unconscious. The heroes are in awe as All Might falls onto his back. They all cower in fear as Ochako looks at them. I'm on your side, I promise, IPU. Ochako is hit in the side of the head and sent out of the building. What the hell was that? Ochako thinks to herself as she falls down the very tall building. Suddenly she feels something below her and looks over to see Shigaraki. Her eyes widen, but before she can attack, Shigaraki puts her on the top of another building. The two lock eyes. Why did you save me? She asks the man. Don't thank me, I only did it to return the favor. Toga's face appears under Shigaraki's and she flies away. Ochako looks up to the building where the fight was and sees heroes looking out around the city. She runs and runs using one for all until she's back at Inko's apartment. She bursts in the door and runs to her room where she has a laptop. She opens it and types something in. She opens an application and smiles. Now I'll know where Izuku is. She thinks to herself, looking at the tracker's location. Even though all hell had broken loose, Ochako now had the location of Toga. The only reason she helped her was to help herself. She had become a full-fledged villain in the eyes of the heroes, but she was closer than ever to finding the real Izuku. Chapter 35. Izuku was horrified as he watched All for One hold Toga against the wall by her neck, strangling her. Why did you let yourself be revealed like that? Now the ninth knows that this boy is still alive. All for One tightens his grip on the girl's neck and she starts to become purple. Izuku hesitated as Toga looked at him with pleading eyes. Like she wanted him to save her. Izuku raised his hand and immediately All for One turned around. Izuku Midoriya, are you daring to attack me? All for One grinned at the boy who cowered in fear. All for One dropped Toga to the ground and she immediately started coughing as a few tears ran down her face. All for One walked up to Izuku and grabbed him by the chin. The man towered over Izuku, and Izuku just watched the faceless man smile even wider. When the ninth inevitably finds us, I'll kill you right in front of her. All for One pushes Izuku back and he bumps into a wall. All for One leaves the room. Izuku trembles and walks up to Toga. Hey, are you okay? Izuku asks begrudgingly. Toga looked up at him and nods. She doesn't say anything and stands up. Izuku watches as she walks up to him. Her eyes shadowy. I want to help you, Toga whispered. Izuku's eyes widened. What do you mean? Izuku was taken back by her. Over the past 2 years, the two hadn't become anything more than a one-sided relationship. Toga claimed she was head over heels for the boy, yet couldn't even tell him his favorite color, and he wanted nothing to do with her. I'm tired of being mistreated because of my quirk. The heroes never helped me, but I'm noticing that now the League is just using me for my power. Toga turns around and backs up close to Izuku. What are you doing? Izuku got scared and the girl shushed him. Look at the back of my neck, she tells him. Izuku pushed her hair out of the way and saw a small chip in her neck. What is that? Izuku questioned while poking it. Your friend Ochako put it on me this morning when we fought. She knows where I am now. At first I was angry, but now I'm happy she did it. Toga turns back around and backs away from the boy with a blush. Izuku's eyes widened. She's looking for me? Izuku couldn't believe it. He thought she gave up on him long ago. Has been since I first transformed into you. She picked up on the difference in our mannerisms. She's been on my trail since. Toga smiles at Izuku. I don't care what happens to me, so once she saves you, I'll use your blood to fight off All for One. Is that okay? Toga asks Izuku. Izuku looks at her with a serious expression. No, he replies with Toga becoming confused. Wait, why? Toga looks at the boy as he walks up to her and puts his hands on her shoulders. Why are you a villain? Izuku asks her as she blushes from the physical contact and looks away. Toga looked back into his eyes. Because my quirk, the heroes wouldn't help me. My parents threw me away. No one wanted to be friends with me. They told me to be normal, but it's not my fault. Toga teared up. You're the only one that's ever treated me like I'm a real human. Tears streamed down her face. Izuku grit his teeth. When we get out of here, you'll come with me, and I'll get you help so that you can live a normal life without having to hide from people because of your quirk. Izuku told the girl with her nodding in response. Thank you, Izuku Midoriya. Toga's tear-filled eyes were genuine. Izuku nodded and turned back, walking and sitting down on his bed. Get out of here, he'll get suspicious. Izuku tells the girl, who obliges and leaves the room. Toga walked back into the main area of the hideout and saw the League sitting at the bar. Where were you? Shigaraki asks while raising an eyebrow at the girl. I was with the boy. Needed to refill on his blood. She lies with a giggle. Shigaraki smirks. You really like using that kid's power, don't you? Dabi says while sipping on a drink. Toga nods with a smile. He's so fun to use. She's maniacally giggles and sits down. She wasn't lying that time, but she was over-exaggerating. We're discussing something while Master is gone, Shigaraki tells Toga. Which is? Toga asks, slightly nervous. We all have different goals than Master does, and Master thinks he's smart, but he's not as smart as he gives himself credit for, Shigaraki says, surprising Toga. He wants to take over my body and remove my consciousness. Shigaraki continues, making Toga's eyes widen. I won't let him do that, but the longer we stay here, the easier it'll be for him to do so. Shigaraki looks at the group. So we're leaving, he finishes. All of us? Toga questions, surprised at the whole situation. Shigaraki nods. Hear that, Toga? That asshole finally won't have you running errands for him. Dabi laughs. Toga feels sweat drip down her face. Let's bring the kid, Toga blurts out, making Shigaraki suspicious. Why would we do that? Spinner asks, confused at her request. If All for One has Izuku, then he'll be able to get the quirk of that one girl, and if he gets that, we won't be able to stop him, Toga says, with Shigaraki smiling at her statement. You're right, I could ruin his plans to get one for all, then I can achieve my dream without him trying to ruin it. Shigaraki's smile becomes bigger as he stands up and walks toward Izuku's room. He walks inside and Izuku immediately stands up and backs into a corner. What do you want? Izuku stutters and puts his fists up. Shut up. Shigaraki puts his hand on Izuku's head. What are you doing? Izuku tried to get out of Shigaraki's grasp but to no avail. Suddenly a sharp pain shot through Izuku's head. He's using the all-for-one quirk on me, Izuku thought to himself as the pain slowly subsided. I took that damn telepathy quirk Master gave you, now come with me. Shigaraki grabbed Izuku's wrist and dragged him out of the room. Where are you taking me? Izuku tried to get out of Shigaraki's grip. For the first time since he was initially kidnapped over 2 years ago, Izuku activated a quirk. Flames shot out of his wrist and whole left side which Shigaraki was holding. The League watched in surprise. Listen, you're coming with us, we're getting you out of here and away from Master, Shigaraki told the boy. Toga walked up in front of Izuku and held a knife to his neck, his flames starting to burn her outfit. Listen to him, or I'll kill you! Her face didn't match her words and Izuku's flames extinguished immediately. Izuku nodded. You know, for someone you hate so much you seem to love calling him Master. Daobi grins at Shigaraki who growls. We're gonna get away from all for one. Shigaraki opens the door to the hideout. Toga grabs Izuku's hand and nods to him. Shigaraki looks back at all of them. Let's go. Chapter 36. Ochako looked at her laptop and her eyes widened. Toga was rapidly approaching her location. She closed the laptop and used one for all to run out of her room and out of the apartment. She jumped to the top of the apartment building. She looked down and saw Toga walking near the center. Ochako activated one for all and jumped down, landing on Toga and pinning her to the ground. What the hell are you doing here? Ochako held her forearm against Toga's neck, slowly putting pressure on it. I have a message from Izuku, Toga quietly said, making Ochako immediately back off. What is it? Ochako keeps Toga pinned but doesn't keep her forearm on her neck. He wants to say that he's able to be saved, and that he'll be near me. Always. Toga tells her, making Ochako confused. Why are you telling me this? Ochako asks with Toga laughing a bit. I'm done being treated like a monster, so I'm gonna save Izuku, and I'm done being a villain just because of my nature. You can believe me or you cannot. She pauses and slides under Ochako to where she's standing up again. The League and All for One are no longer allies at the moment. We have Izuku in our possession because All for One was using him to bait you to take your quirk. All for One will eventually attack us to get him back. Toga pauses again and gets up close to Ochako. Be there when he attacks, and you'll be able to save Izuku, she whispers before backing up. And maybe even save me. Toga smiles before disappearing. It had been 2 months since Ochako fought Toga in the raid. Since then she had been keeping tabs on the girl but hadn't pounced because of a lack of knowledge of what she was getting into. She finally had the chance to find Izuku. She wasn't gonna throw it away by being impatient. Ochako looked around before walking back into the apartment. Inko, I'm gonna head out, she yelled while walking back in her room. Alright sweetie, I'll see you later, Inko yelled back from the other side of the apartment. Ochako changed into her costume and ran out of the house. She opened her phone and sent a text. I'm on my way. Okay, the person replied. Ochako did a few squats before latching Black Whip onto 2 buildings. Third, Fa Jean flowed throughout her legs. Ochako flung herself into the air. 7th, she started floating so she could stay up in the air and continued to fly. Ochako landed and looked around her. She hadn't been on Udata grounds since she was expelled. She walked to the back of the dorms and jumped up to Bakugo's room. The window was open and she entered and looked around. There Bakugo lay on his bed. What's up? Bakugo says while sitting up and walking over to his door, locking it. A lot actually. Ochako walked over and sat on Bakugo's bed. But first, how are you? I'm sorry we haven't talked in person in so long. Ochako looks at him as he sits down next to her. Well, besides having lost my left arm, I'm doing fine. Bakugo showed the nub where his left arm used to be. Ochako frowned. I'm sorry I let that happen. Ochako had been beating herself up about it. Stop blaming yourself for things. It's annoying. Bakugo rolled his eyes. Sorry, Ochako chuckled. So, what is it you needed to meet for? Bakugo asked while looking at Ochako. Big news on Izuku. Ochako smiled, making Bakugo curious. Well, go on, spit it out. Bakugo urged her. I know how we're gonna find him. Ochako let her excitement get the best of her and accidentally yelled. Shit, Bakugo muttered, hearing footsteps toward his room. A knock was heard on his door. Bakugo, who are you talking to? Shoto's voice came through the door. I'm on the phone, icy hot. Bakugo lies to Shoto. Ochako looks at Bakugo, who looks back, and the two nod. Ochako jumps out of the window and flies away. Bakugo walks up to the door and opens it. What is it? Bakugo asks Shoto. Shoto looks at him. May I come in? He asks the explosion user. Bakugo nods and Shoto walks in before turning around and closing the door, locking it behind him. So, what's up with you? Bakugo asks as the boy walks over to him. You were just with Uraraka, weren't you? Shoto confronts Bakugo. Bakugo feels his heart sink. Nah, I haven't seen her since the raid a few months ago. Bakugo lied, with Shoto glancing over to him. Shoto gets up and walks over to Bakugo's desk. He grabs a notebook and opens it up. The hell are you doing? Bakugo got up and walked towards Shoto. Shoto grabs a pen and starts to write something down. She said Midoriya was able to be saved. Did she elaborate? Shoto wrote, with Bakugo's eyes widening. He ripped the paper out of Shoto's hands. No, she left before she could. Shoto took the paper back. Did you guys exchange contact information? Suddenly Bakugo's phone buzzed and then immediately grabbed it from his pocket. Bakugo looks at Shoto and nods. Meet me near Izuku's house later and let me know when you're here, the message said. Bakugo and Shoto looked at each other. You're coming with me, Bakugo told the boy, who nodded in response. Good. Bakugo smiled. Even though he had grown less egotistical and crazy, he still had the same smile that made it look like he wanted to kill you. A knock on the door interrupted the two. Shoto threw out the piece of paper and beckoned Bakugo to open the door. Bakugo walked over and opened it. Hey Bakugo, is Shoto in here? Momo tries to peek over Bakugo's shoulder, but he doesn't let her. Don't be so nosy, but yes, your boyfriend is in here. Bakugo teases, with Momo blushing in response. Shoto walks over to the door. Hey there. He smiles at Momo. Hey, I told you to come get Bakugo for dinner, not a hangout session. Momo scolded the boy. Shoto just chuckles. Sorry, got sidetracked. Shoto lies to the girl, who just pouts in response. Shoto moves past Bakugo and grabs Momo's hand while starting to walk back toward the stairs. Don't worry, Bakugo, we can hang out later. Shoto looks back to the boy with a playful smirk. Good damn icy hot. Bakugo nodded. He then followed the two to dinner. Izuku stood in front of Shigaraki, breathing heavily. Keep going, Shigaraki told the boy before almost instantly appearing in front of him with his leg in the air ready to kick him. Izuku breathed slowly and dodged the kick by sliding to the side. Die, Izuku yelled before shooting an explosion out of his hand, sending his elbow back into his jaw, almost dislocating it. Shigaraki jumped into the air and regeneration brought his jaw back to normal. Izuku threw out his hand and Black Whip spewed into the air, latching around Shigaraki's waist. Izuku smirked and started bringing Shigaraki toward him. He jumped up and met him halfway. Izuku crashed his fist into Shigaraki's face and Shigaraki smiled. You're getting better. Shigaraki grabs the Black Whip as Izuku starts to fall back to the ground. But getting me like that means I can use Black Whip against you. Shigaraki rips Black Whip back toward him and Izuku flies up into the air. Shigaraki flies up to Izuku and puts his hand on his face. You're dead, Shigaraki says before taking his hand off of Izuku's head, and the two fall to the ground. Once the two regained their footing, Izuku looked at Shigaraki. Thanks, this is helping a lot, Izuku says as Shigaraki slowly melts, revealing it was Toga. Of course, Suzuki, you will probably have to fight him someday, Toga replies with a smile. The two had been sparring almost daily to prepare Izuku to defend himself against All for One when he attacked, and so he could defeat Shigaraki and not let him get his wish of ultimate destruction. Since Izuku had been malnourished prior to leaving with the League, they had been helping him gain back his former physique. Of course, 2 months wasn't enough to get back to his former glory, but he was better in combat than ever. Toga was the only member of the League who got along with Izuku for obvious reasons, so the two were attached to the hip. Platonically, of course. Since Izuku had new quirks over the 2 years that he didn't know how to control, he was trying to stay safe. His quirks, while being used, still changed his personality, which made using multiple very difficult with the conflicting thoughts in his head. But he had gotten better at being tame and calm during fights to minimize how much his personality could affect them. You ready to go back? Toga asks as she picks up her knives. Izuku nods while walking toward her. Alright, let's get out of here. Chapter 37. Now I have plenty allies to assist us against All for One. Shigaraki smiled and stared down at the army he had accumulated. Whilst Toga and Izuku were sparring, Shigaraki and the rest of the League were in the trenches. After fighting Redestro and taking over the new Paranormal Liberation Front, Shigaraki was ecstatic. And now, no one can stop me. Bakugo and Shoto walked down the street and toward Izuku's apartment. So this is the place? Shoto asked Bakugo as he went to take his hood off. Ochako pounced at the boy off of the roof and pinned him to the floor. Who are you? Ochako held Shoto down while holding a knee on his back. Ah damn, Shoto said while trying to move his hands. Bakugo looked at the two and busted out laughing. Ochako looked up at Bakugo. The hell are you laughing at? You were being followed. Ochako growled while looking back down to Shoto. Uraraka, it's me, Shoto said with Ochako gripping down on his hood. Who? Ochako didn't let up. Shoto Todoroki. Shoto started to get fed up and rolled up, sending Ochako off of her. Todoroki? Ochako rolled back to her feet and walked up to him, offering a hand. I'm sorry, I had no clue it was you. You sound so different. Ochako helped the boy up and he towered over her. And you're a lot taller, she told the at least 6-foot-tall boy. Shoto chuckled. That's what aging does to you. He rubbed the back of his head. Anyways, why are you here? Bakugo told you about this stuff? Ochako urgently asked the boy while looking at his now really short hair. Well, no, we're both here so you can tell us though, Shoto answered. Also, my hair is shorter, yeah. Not only have I gotten bigger, but I've decided it getting in my eyes annoyed me too much, Shoto said while Ochako slowly reached to touch his hair. Shoto bent down slightly so Ochako could actually reach. Whoa, Ochako poked his head, making him laugh. Good to see you haven't changed too much, Uraraka. Shoto continued to laugh. I've changed a little bit. Ochako ripped her wig off, revealing her relatively short hair. WH, Shoto walked over and tapped her head just like she did to him, and the two laughed. Wait, you're not mad at me for being a vigilante? Ochako questioned while backing up a bit. Shoto sighed. Listen, the whole class knew it was coming once we saw how you left UA. Even if we weren't all the closest friends at the time, we knew you well enough, Shoto told the girl, who smiled in response. Then why don't we get all of Class 1A in on this mission? Ochako exclaimed while clenching her fist and smiling at the two in front of her. Class 3A, Shoto corrected. Bakugo snorted a laugh and nodded. First tell us the plan though, Bakugo told the girl. Oh yeah, come with me. Ochako was super excited that the class didn't hate her like she had come to assume. Ochako brought the two boys into Inko's apartment. I'm back, Ochako called out with Inko walking out of her room. Whoa, Bakugo couldn't help but say. Katsuki? It's been so long. Inko ran over and hugged the boy. Auntie Inko, you look great, Bakugo says, noticing her significant weight loss in the 2 years he went without seeing her. Thank you, Inko backs up and smiles at the boy. And who might you be? Another vigilante? Inko puts her hand out to Shoto. Actually, no, I'm in Bakugo's class and Uraraka's former class. Shoto shakes her hand and smiles. Wait a minute, I think I recognize you. Inko puts her hand on her chin. I'm Shoto Todoroki. I was a decent friend of Midoriya back in our first year, but I'm not sure we've ever met. Shoto smiles at the woman. Also, he fought me at the first year sports festival. Ochako added, with Inko immediately snapping her finger. That's it, you and Ochako had that awesome match. Inko was happy she recognized him. Shoto chuckled and nodded. That too, he said before Bakugo clapped, gaining all of their attention. Ochako, need you to explain your plan now, our curfew is soon. Bakugo told the girl, with her quickly running to Izuku's room and bringing out her laptop. See this? Ochako opens the tracking app. Yeah? Shoto and Bakugo say in unison. That's where Himiko Toga is, the girl who is with Izuku. She met me this morning and told me that she knew she was being tracked and that she was going to turn her back on the villains and give us the chance to save Izuku in the process. Ochako smiled at the two boys. Wait, so you're saying you have the exact location of Midoriya and you haven't told anyone? Shoto raised his voice a bit in surprise. Well, yes and no, I have his location, but right now isn't the optimal time to get him. The League has drifted away from All for One, and Toga said the perfect opportunity for us to get Izuku back is when that war starts. Ochako grins at the two. I have an idea, Shoto said, making everyone look at him. Uraraka, do you have another one of those trackers? Shoto asked the girl, with her reaching into her pocket immediately and pulling one out. Yeah, right here, she says. Okay. So you use that on yourself and give us the thing to track it, and we can tell the school we got a tracker on you. We decide when the battle will be when you tell Bakugo you know when All for One is attacking. Until then we'll be ready. Shoto smiles at Ochako, whose eyes widen. You're a genius. Ochako jumps up and down a bit before taking the chip and breathing. How do you put the chip so it can track yo? Shoto freezes as Ochako stabs herself with the chip, lodging it into her arm. There we go. Ochako smiles, with Shoto and Bakugo cringing at what they could imagine would be a painful action. Alright, here, Todoroki, give me your phone. Ochako holds her hand out, and Shoto obliges, giving her the phone. Shoto watches as Ochako types something. Here you go. Ochako hands his phone back and he sees Ochako's contact info in his phone. Cool, then it's a plan? Shoto says to the two. Bakugo nods and the two look at Ochako. Ochako smirks. Let's get him back. Chapter 38. All for One sat at his desk. Is it done? He asked with a smirk as Dr. Garaki held a syringe in his hand. Yes, sir, it's ready for you. The old man smiled with wide eyes. All for One put up his sleeve and Garaki stuck the syringe in one of his veins. All for One smiles as a liquid enters his system. A glow surrounds the man as he rewinds. Slowly the upper half of his face returned and his body returned to its prime strength. The rewind stopped and All for One stood up with a huge grin. He had returned to his prime fully. Now I can fight Tamura with my real power and take his body for my own. All for One looked in a mirror and was able to see himself for the first time since his battle with All Might almost 10 years ago. Remember, sir, eventually if you take enough damage you will die. So don't have too much fun. Garaki laughed, with All for One looking back at him with a grin. I can't make any promises. Ochako flew through the city and suddenly felt danger sense go haywire. This was nothing she had ever felt before, not since All for One back at the overhaul incident. Ochako's eyes widened as she fought back the pain. Ochako tumbled onto the top of a building. It's happening. Ochako pulled out her phone and called Bakugo. He quickly picked up. Hi Mom, I'm in class, what do you need? Bakugo answered the phone. Bakugo, you have to tell them you have a tracker of me now. All for One is back. I'm not sure where, but I just felt a presence I haven't felt since the overhaul raid. Ochako yelled through the phone. Bakugo looked over to Shoto and Shoto nodded before standing up. Mr. Aizawa, I have a confession. Ochako heard Shoto yell before Bakugo hung up. Ochako looked around and saw nothing. I better find Toga, she thought to herself before feeling a hand wrap around her neck. Her eyes widened. Seriously, did you think I didn't have tabs on you? Ninth. All for one smiled. Izuku and Toga were in the Paranormal Liberation's hideout, and Izuku felt a sharp pain in his head. What the hell is that? Izuku held his head. Danger, danger, a voice called out in his head. Izuku stood up and stumbled to a window. Outside he saw a dark force rapidly approaching. Suddenly someone crashed through the window. Izuku jumped over and tackled Toga out of the way. Smoke cleared and in front of Izuku stood All for One. You got away with Tamira. All for One went to grab Izuku, but Black Whip attached to All for One's arm, stopping it. Izuku's eyes darted over, and for the first time in over 2 years, he saw Ochako. Stay away from him. Ochako grit her teeth as blood spilled out of her head. Ochako. Izuku almost started crying until All for One started to laugh. What a reunion! All for One yelled before grabbing Black Whip and throwing Ochako into Izuku, knocking both of them into a wall. Toga looked at the two as Ochako quickly got back to her feet. Izuku taking a few seconds longer. Toga quickly transformed. Ochako, Toga said while turning into Shigaraki. Ochako looked over to Toga and his eyes widened. I'll hold him off. Toga sent tendrils at All for One and All for One smacked them away. You think an even less superior version of my quirk can compete with mine, you foolish little girl? All for One smiled and sent tendrils at Toga, who avoided using a flying quirk. Toga, no you can't. Izuku yelled before Toga flew over and grabbed both him and Ochako and flew out of the building. She flew as far as she could and set the two down on a building. Trust me, I got this. Toga smiled at the two. As she went to turn around, a huge tendril split right through her stomach. Toga, Izuku yelled as blood splattered all over him. Toga transformed back to her own body and started to fall forward, landing on Izuku's chest. Izuku's eyes were wide opened and his mouth was agape. I'm sorry, Izuku, I wish I could have seen where you brought me once we escaped, Toga said before going silent. It felt as if the whole world stopped while the life left Toga's eyes. Ochako's eyes widened. All for One neared the group and laughed. That brat had it coming. All for laughed and shot a tendril at Izuku. Izuku couldn't move, he was in too much shock, tears constantly flowing down his face. Izuku, Ochako went to grab him using Black Whip. Instead, someone tackled him out of the way and flew into another building. Ochako's eyes followed them. Who the hell? Danger sense went off and Ochako dodged a tendril. All for One laughed. I wonder which user that danger sense is from, All for One said while charging at Ochako. A huge wall of ice showed up in front of Ochako, and she looked over to see Shoto. Shoto, Ochako almost yelled. Ochako looked back to the building Izuku had gotten tackled into. There she saw Bakugo holding Izuku up with an arm. Bakugo, Ochako started to smile as heroes became prominent in the scene. Yes, Ochako celebrated before the ice in front of her shattered. More pests. All for One growled before receiving a punch in the face from Ochako. All for One growled and went to hit Ochako but was quickly sent away by a shockwave. Danger sense started to go haywire again as Ochako looked up and saw Shigaraki with an angry look on his face. Shit, Ochako watched as Shigaraki flew at All for One. Ochako saw two people flying at her from a distance, and as the figures got closer she recognized them. Hawks, Ochako called out before looking closer. Dad. Hawks flew in and dropped All Might next to Ochako. Dad. Ochako went to back up, but All Might ran up to her and brought her into a hug. I'm so happy you're safe, All Might said with Ochako having tears well up in her eyes. Dad, Ochako hugged him back. Deku, are you with me? Bakugo yelled at the boy who was still staring into space with Toga's blood all over him. She's dead, Izuku mumbled with Bakugo slapping him in the face. Don't let her death be in vain, fight with us. Izuku snapped out of his trance and he grit his teeth. Before he could jump away and at All for One he was a man jumped into the building. You! I've heard you were strong. Muscular stood across from Izuku and Bakugo. And I heard you were in prison, Bakugo shot back with Muscular smirking. Tartarus is in shambles. All for One broke everyone out last night. Muscular told the two with Bakugo's eyes widening. Izuku, on the contrary, couldn't think of anything else but revenge on Toga. He could take out anyone in his way if he had to. Right now, that person was Muscular. War had fully broken out, All for One versus the Paranormal Liberation Army versus the heroes and Ochako. Chapter 39. Izuku slowly started walking toward Muscular. You have a lot of quirks, right? Muscular laughed. Izuku's eyes became shadowy as he put his hand out. Tendrils shot out and straight through Muscular's stomach. Muscular's eyes widened as he spit up blood. What the hell? Bakugo watched as Izuku beat Muscular in cold blood with little to no effort. Izuku looked back to Bakugo. His eyes were red, and Toga's blood still dripped down his face. He looked like he was ready to kill anyone. Can you fight alone? Izuku asked Bakugo while he looked at Bakugo's new robotic left arm. Bakugo felt his throat become dry. Yeah, I can hold my own. What are you planning? Bakugo asked. Izuku ignored his question and walked past Muscular, who fell down onto his face unconscious. Shigaraki held All for One by the face. Master, your time is done. He tried to use the All for One quirk, but All for One sent tendrils through his stomach, sending him flying back. Shigaraki's super regeneration quickly brought him back to full health, and he growled. Why can't you just go down? Shigaraki asked the man while flying at him. All for One smiled and lasers flew out of his eyes. Shigaraki barely dodged and grit his teeth. I won't let you ruin my dream. Shigaraki punched All for One in the stomach, and All for One grinned. You can't touch me, Tamura. I made you as strong as my prime, and I'm at that same point. It's an even bout. At least it would be if I didn't have the experience. All for One activated Heart Flame Fan, a quirk that creates a giant wall of flames around him, flames even hotter than Dabi's. You are my creation, I won't let you defeat me. All for One laughed as he activated Air Cannon and shot Shigaraki into the fire before using his quirk Hypertrophy to enlarge his arm and grab onto his face, holding him in the fire. Shigaraki's skin started to burn and he quickly became barely anything but a husk of himself. He screamed in pain as he started regenerating, but the flames still burned him. See, Tamura, you are no match for me. All for One smiled. All for One heard the flames to his right become more prominent and looked over to see Izuku with ice encapsulating his body. I am gonna kill you! Izuku roared as he broke the ice keeping him from burning and used an explosion to hit All for One. All for One smiled and used another quirk, Impact Recall. The attack sent at All for One was absorbed by this quirk and sent back at Izuku, who couldn't react in time and faced the blunt force of his own explosions, knocking him back through the fire. All for One then grabbed Izuku as well and held him in the flames. None of you are a match for me, All for One yelled with a laugh. This is where spoilers for the actual manga come into play. The second user's quirk will be used here. If you don't want it spoiled, stop reading now. If you don't care, then go on ahead. Second. Ochako touched her fingers together. Gearshift Ochako changed her speed and she flew through the fire and kicked All for One with a 100% smash. He lost grip of Shigaraki and Izuku, and the flames subsided. Remember, Ochako, you don't have long. After you stop using this meta ability now, you will be out of the fight. The second user communicated. Ochako nodded. Third red energy flowed through her legs. She jumped at All for One. The surrounding people couldn't even see her because of her immense speed. All for One recognized the power, but he couldn't believe what it had become. This ability it used to only be able to shoot tiny objects, All for One thought to himself before trying to put his hand and then use Impact Recall. Ochako was too fast. Quintuple Detroit Smash. Ochako hit All for One 5 times before he could even see her. All for One was sent into the ground, and he felt something for the first time since he fought the original second user. Doubt. All for One grit his teeth as Ochako flies at him again before he can react. First gear. Ochako sped herself up and slammed her leg into All for One's face. All for One bounced up off the ground and blood shot out of his mouth. Second gear. Ochako sped up again and kicked All for One into the ground, breaking multiple ribs. All for One became angry and used impact recoil, holding it for the next impact. Third gear Ochako slammed down onto All for One but felt a resistance. "What the hell?" Ochako said before being blasted away. Pain shot through Ochako's body, and she flew into a building. The impact was so bad that Ochako was almost unconscious. She lay in the rubble of a building as it was falling over. "Is that really how strong I am?" Ochako thought to herself before closing her eyes. "Don't die on me, damn it!" Ochako opened her eyes and saw All Might in his muscle form. "Dad," Ochako cried. All Might picked her up and jumped into another building. "It hurts so bad," Ochako mutters while trying to stay conscious. She had never been hit by something like she just had. All for One's impact recoil dealt just as much as damage as he would have taken. "Ochako, you're gonna be okay." All Might grit his teeth and put Ochako down. "Dad, how are you using one for all? It's been over 2 years." Ochako coughed up blood and All Might just stared at her. This bastard, All Might thought of All for One. "I never exerted the rest of my powers, but I can only last around 20 minutes per day." All Might clenched his fists. "Never fear, Ochako." All Might looked over to where All for One had been. "Because I am here." Chapter 40. All Might stood up and All for One looked over to him. A huge grin appeared on his face as he saw All Might in his muscle form. "Dad, stop, you'll die," Ochako begged All Might. "Ochako, what kind of father would I be if I didn't put my life on the line to protect my daughter?" All Might said with Ochako's eyes widening. All Might prepared to jump down. "Dad, please," Ochako screamed. "All Might." All for One watched as All Might jumped down. Texas smash, All Might yelled while trying to hit All for One. All for One dodged and his eyes widened. "You're slow, Toshinori." All for One activates his spear-like bones quirk and punches All Might in the side, piercing him. Blood spewed out of All Might's body, and he coughed up blood. He jumped up and held his side. Damn it, All Might tried to back away, but tendrils flew out of All for One's fingers, puncturing his stomach. All Might had flashes of a younger Ochako fly through his head. "I'm sorry, I wish I spent more time with you back then." All Might looks over to Ochako, who was bawling her eyes out trying to stand up. Izuku sat up from his position along with Shigaraki. The two watched as All for One and All Might clashed. It was a one-sided bout, All for One completely dominating. "All Might, you truly are weak." All for One kicks All Might in the stomach, knocking him onto his knees. He leans over and holds his stomach. All for One watches. "Part of me pities you. You used to be such a formidable foe, and now you're pathetic." All for One walked up and kicked All Might again onto his back. "Do you have anything to say for yourself? As you let yourself die in front of your daughter?" All for One grins. All Might smiles. "I was just a distraction." All for One is suddenly pierced by tendrils from both sides. He looks to his left and sees Shigaraki, and then to his right and sees Izuku. He looks back to All Might, who was now laughing. Ochako watched from afar in awe as tears still flowed down her face. "Don't get cocky, you haven't even got the brunt of their power," All Might yells before All for One points his hands out at him. Ochako watched as All for One prepared to kill her father. "Come on, get up, damn it," Ochako internally scolded herself as she pushed herself up onto her feet. Not only had her own blast done significant damage, but Gearshift had ended, making her extremely exhausted. "One for all," she muttered. 100%. She barely got out before jumping at All for One. All for One glared up at her and switched his target to her. "You're also bait," All for One told All Might. Before he could shoot the tendrils out of his fingers, he was kicked in the side by Shigaraki. It sent him into another kick in the face from Izuku, almost snapping his neck. The third and final hit was from Ochako, who sent him backward into a building, smashing right through it. Izuku looked at Shigaraki and then Ochako. "Don't think this means I'm on your side." Shigaraki goes to hit Izuku and Ochako punches him out of the way. The trio look back and see All for One appearing out of the building. "Izuku, take Dad and get him far away," Ochako ordered while holding off Shigaraki as he tried to touch the ground and use decay. Izuku hesitated before running over and grabbing All Might, who had reverted to his small form. Young Midoriya put me down, All Might mumbled. Izuku grit his teeth as he dashed away. No, All Might, I won't let you die, not when Ochako is already going through enough. Izuku ran behind a building and put All Might down. What do I do? Izuku watched as his idol bled out in front of him. Izuku felt the situation fully sink in and he started crying. He ran out to where the heroes were. Help, a man is dying, please help me, Izuku screamed. Someone landed next to him with another person on his back. Midoriya, Aizawa called out to the boy and Izuku looked over. Mr. Aizawa. Izuku beckoned him over. Aizawa followed Izuku and saw All Might on the ground. Damn it, Aizawa hauled the person on his back onto the ground. Who is this? Izuku looked at the young girl as she walked over. All Might, Eri said, looking at the man. Eri, All Might coughed and smiled. The now 9-year-old girl put her hands in All Might's. You're gonna be okay, All Might. Eri closed her eyes and the horn on her head started to glow. Aizawa walked up to Izuku. Are you the real Izuku Midoriya? Aizawa asked with a glare. Izuku nodded with a firm stare. Even if I wasn't, now isn't the time. Izuku turned around and looked at the destruction of All for One, Shigaraki, and Ochako's fight. He watched as Shigaraki put his hand toward the floor with a huge smile. Ochako was occupied with All for One, so either of them could stop him. He's gonna use decay, Izuku mumbled before panicking. Stop! Izuku started to run toward the fight. Stop using that quirk! His eyes became red and his hair flew up into the air. Shigaraki touched the floor but nothing happened. What the hell? Shigaraki went to hit the ground again but still nothing. He grit his teeth and looked around. He spotted Izuku and smirked. I knew I should have killed you instead of taking you with me. Shigaraki yelled to Izuku before Black Whip wrapped around his neck and started to strangle him. Don't you dare! Ochako grit her teeth and continued to strangle Shigaraki. Shigaraki looked back up at her with anger in his eyes. Tell me, is Tenko still in there? Ochako yelled at him. Chapter 41. While Izuku was with Eri, All for One and Shigaraki both fought back and forth while Ochako slowly recovered. Ninth, you saw Tenko, didn't you? Nana's voice echoed through Ochako's head. Ochako grit her teeth as she stood up. Yeah, I did, she replied to Nana. The choice is yours. Will you save him, or do you think he's too far gone? Ochako thought back to when she saw Tenko. He was surrounded by hands and looked afraid. Suddenly Shigaraki's hand was on Ochako's face and her eyes widened. She was pulled into the One for All realm and there she saw Shigaraki, All for One, hanging on him like an extra limb. I don't care about this power, but Master does. If Master wants it so bad, then I'll take it for myself and kill him with it, Shigaraki told her while inside the One for All realm. Ochako looked to her sides to see the past users pushing Shigaraki away. A flash occurred and there Ochako saw Tenko again. This time the young boy was crying. Help me! Ochako snapped back to reality to see All for One kicking Shigaraki off of her. That quirk is mine, Tamira! All for One smiled as he turned back to Ochako and started to throw a punch. Ochako barely dodged. She was still fatigued from using gearshift but managed to keep up. This quirk isn't anyone's but mine. Ochako used Black Whip to drag herself back a bit so she could compose herself. If Tenko really is in there, Ochako looked over to Shigaraki, who was standing up in a pile of rubble with a smile on his face looking right back at her. Then can I save him? Ochako saw Shigaraki start to fly at her with a huge smile on his face. Ochako braces herself and takes the brunt of an attack from Shigaraki. Before Shigaraki can follow up on his attack, All for One shoots Ochako in the side with tendrils. Ochako grits her teeth as tears fly out of her eyes. Doesn't feel so good, does it? All for One laughs before looking to Shigaraki, who seems angry. Stop interfering. Shigaraki goes to use decay on All for One, but All for One uses air cannon to shoot Shigaraki away. All for One looks back to Ochako. Unlike those rats, you don't have regeneration. All for One looks closely at Ochako and sees bruises forming all over her. You can run on empty. All for One's smile becomes wider as he runs at Ochako, activating spear-like bones and air cannon to almost instantly appear in front of Ochako. Ochako puts her hand out and touches All for One. Seconds. All for One freezes in place and his eyes widen. Gearshift Ochako feels herself become heavy and struggles to stand up. Ninth, I told you it was only for dire situations, the second scolded. If I didn't use it there, I would have died. Ochako feels it become harder to breathe but walks up to All for One. The man smiled as she neared him. Black goo flew out of his mouth and he disappeared. Ochako halted to a stop and grit her teeth. Damn it, Ochako turned back around as her body almost gave out. She felt blood dripping down her face along with tears. Ninth, you need to rest. If you keep going at this rate, you'll die, Nana tells Ochako, who shakes her head. No, I can't stop. I didn't go this far just to clock out early, Ochako thinks while looking over and seeing Shigaraki about to charge at Izuku, who had red eyes similar to Aizawa. Ochako touched her hands again. Second. Ninth, stop it, Nana basically begged Ochako, who ignored her and flew at Shigaraki. Fifth. Ochako grabbed Shigaraki before he could touch the ground. Don't you dare! Ochako pulled back on Black Whip, strangling Shigaraki. Tell me, is Tenko still in there? Ochako ripped Shigaraki back toward her as she saw Izuku's eyes become watery. Izuku, how long can you hold on to erasure? Ochako yells to him while Shigaraki growls and throws Ochako off of him. I don't know. Izuku felt his eyes try and close on their own. Tenko is dead, Shigaraki yelled at Ochako while trying to use rivet stab, red and black tendrils flowing from his fingers. Don't worry, Midoriya, I got it from here. Aizawa put a hand on his shoulder and activated erasure. The tendrils stop before they pierce Ochako's stomach and Ochako looks back over to see Aizawa. Thanks, Mr. Aizawa. Ochako looks back to Shigaraki. All for One, I know you're in there. Ochako grits her teeth and used 100% of One for All to hit Shigaraki in his face. Shigaraki's face starts to shift, his grin turning from sadistic to calculated. Ochako continued to punch him over and over, blood splattered all over the two and Shigaraki continued to regenerate back again and again. Damn it, Ochako activated FA gene in her arms and used a smash even more powerful than a 100%. Once the smoke cleared, Ochako saw All for One's real face through a gash in Shigaraki's face. Her eyes widened and she immediately went to punch the small version of the real All for One but was pierced through the stomach by the rivet tendrils. Her eyes widened and she looked at Shigaraki, who had a huge grin on his face. Die, he said before being kicked in the jaw. His jaw broke completely off and the bottom half of his mouth flew onto the ground before quickly regenerating. Shigaraki let go of Ochako and looked over to see Izuku breathing heavily. Izuku, how the hell? Ochako watches as Izuku presses his fingers together. Ochako's eyes widen. It looks like he not only has the fifths. Nana starts. The second user looks at Izuku. He also has my quirk. Izuku stood breathing heavily. I don't know what the hell just happened, he says out loud to no one in particular as he activates erasure again. Izuku smiled. But I think this fight just became a lot more in our favor. Chapter 42. Izuku looked over to Ochako, who was still baffled at the sight. Izuku didn't know why, but he could feel power coursing through him. Ochako, I think I have it. Izuku looked at his hands and a green aura started to surround him as energy crackled. Ochako was even more confused. How the hell, even if he gets quirks he's surrounded by, there's not way he has the normal one for all strength that's been accumulated since the first user. She thinks to herself while Shigaraki becomes even more angry. Now there's 2-1 for alls, he growls before going to fly at Izuku with his hand out. Izuku couldn't even react and Shigaraki put his hand on his face. Die, Shigaraki tried to use decay but Aizawa had still been using erasure. Damn it, Shigaraki pulls his hand off of Izuku and clenches his fists. He brings his fists down and punches Izuku in the nose, completely shattering it. Izuku yells in pain as he's crushed to the floor. He opens his mouth to breathe but smoke fills his lungs. He starts having a coughing fit, and Ochako flicks her finger with one for all to clear the smoke. Shigaraki was on top of Izuku and a red aura could be seen coming from his hand. "Give me that damn quirk!" A mix of Shigaraki and All for One's voice could be heard. Izuku was scared until he remembered the last time All for One took his quirk. He never took it. Izuku smiled. "I don't know why it would be, but I don't think my quirk is able to be stolen, no matter what." Izuku gripped Shigaraki's face and squeezed down. Blood splattered all over the two of them and Izuku almost completely ripped off his face. Shigaraki also started to scream and the black and red tendrils flew out of Izuku's palm, through Shigaraki's eyes. Shigaraki fell backwards off of Izuku and onto the ground. He screamed in pain as regeneration slowly brought him back. "I can also use the tendril quirk, but unlike them it's from my palm, not my fingertips." Izuku rolled back up to his feet and felt the pain he felt slowly subsiding, as super regeneration quickly brought him back to full health. Izuku was confused. He didn't feel his personality change when he used the rivet stab quirk. Nor had he for many of the quirks he had been using. "Why isn't it changing my personality, as it usually does?" Izuku looked at his hands and activated explosions. He felt nothing happen. "Why would I not hesitate to hurt someone so bad?" Izuku looked at Shigaraki, whose eyes regenerated as he looked at him. Izuku also thought back to Muscular, who he had almost murdered. The man was in the same building Izuku left him, bleeding profusely. Bakugo was still stood there staring at him. "What the hell should I do?" Bakugo grit his teeth as someone approached him from behind. "Leave him to me." A man with a red mask around his eyes walked up with a blade. Bakugo's eyes widened as Stain approached Muscular. "He's evil, he doesn't deserve life." Stain raised his blade and slammed down into Muscular's neck, putting him out of his misery. "What are you doing here?" Bakugo asked the man as he licks his blade. Stain ignores him and walks out of the building. Bakugo grits his teeth. "Can you people stop ignoring me, damn it?" On the other side of the city, Dabi sat in a chair looking over the rest of the city. When he looked down, he saw Shoto fighting a villain, Kai Chisaki. He had been held in prison for the last 2.5 years since the raid that Ochako beat him in. Once Tartarus was broken into, he got out. With all the rubble the fight between All for One, Shigaraki, Ochako and Izuku had caused, he had free reign with his quirk. Dabi smirked at Shoto and decided he would join the fight. He jumped off the building and flames shot off of his body. "Shoto!" Dabi yelled with an ecstatic look on his face. Shoto looked up confused, but as he did, Overhaul shot his quirk toward him. "Damn it!" Shoto looked over to see Overhaul tackled into a building. Explosions lead from where the person came from. Shoto's eyes widened as he looked back up and shot ice towards Dabi. Dabi melted the ice almost instantly, and the two clashed fists. "You good over there?" Shoto called to the other person. Bakugo jumped out and landed against Shoto's back. "Don't be dumb, of course I'm fine." Bakugo smirked as Overhaul got up and stumbled out of the building. "Oh, what's this? A little reunion." Dabi smiles as the flames on his body make the scars on his face starts to open. "A 1 versus 1 wouldn't be possible without it. Older brother." Shoto smiled at Dabi, who started laughing. "And why should we let villains have fair 1-on-1 bouts? Let's make it 3 versus 2. Ida lands next to the two and smiles through his mask, thus completing the current big 3 of UA. "Let's win this, damn it." Ochako was with Izuku and Shigaraki. The two had been fighting Shigaraki and Shigaraki was slowly becoming overwhelmed. Suddenly a black goop appeared and Izuku disappeared. Ochako's eyes widened as Shigaraki smiled. "It's just me and you." Shigaraki disappeared and Ochako looked over to him and saw Aizawa with Shigaraki's hand on his face. "Aizawa no," Ochako called out before Aizawa smiled as his eyes went red and his hair went up. Shigaraki growled. "Damn you!" Shigaraki punched a man to the side and he crumbled into a building. Shigaraki felt a click in his head and turned to his right where he saw Eri. The girl was terrified and frozen in place. Shigaraki started to smile. "Rewind, one of Master's most sought-after quirks. Shigaraki flew at Eri with a crazed grin and tried to put his hand on her head. Before he could All Might punch the man in the face, this did nothing to Shigaraki because All Might wasn't in his muscle form. "Yarai, run!" Ochako yelled to the young girl, who obliged and ran away. Shigaraki turned to All Might and his smile widened. "Master's most sought-after kill." All for One landed in the middle of a field and breathed heavily. "I guess they were ready for this." The man grit his teeth. "I need to separate them. If I keep fighting them all at once, I'll never win." A grin started to form on his face. Separate and conquer. All for One used his warp quirk and Izuku appeared in front of him. Izuku looked around and saw All for One. "Where the hell are we?" Izuku looked around and his eyes widened. "Back where it all started, right?" All for One smiled. The USJ. Izuku recognized the place. "This is where your quirk first awakened, right?" All for One used hypertrophy and spear-like bones to boost the strength in his arms. "Let's finish this." All for One used air cannon to shoot himself at Izuku, and he swung his arm down at the boy. Izuku quickly jumped out of the way and could barely stay focused as memories flooded through his mind of the first year in UA. Tears glistened in his eyes as the flashbacks started. He remembered working with Bakugo before his quirk awakened in the USJ. The two had chemistry even after the years of torment Izuku had been put through by him. He remembered losing his eye, and All Might barely beating Anomu. He remembered before the USJ, when he had been in U.A without a quirk and still held his own. How times had changed. He remembered meeting Ochako again, and going to hang out with her. Seeing her smile at the beach, when he truly fell for her. Izuku felt his whole body go numb as he looked at All for One. "You're the reason I could stay there." Izuku watched as All for One swung his arm back up at him, and he evaded again. "All for One." Izuku used spear-like bones to cover his whole body. "You're the reason I ever got hurt." He thinks back to Dr. Garaki telling him he was quirkless. All for One smiled at the boy. "I will kill you and take that damn quirk." All for One yelled at Izuku. Izuku's quirk made every quirk in it even better than before. Bakugo's explosions could be used all over. Spear-like bones could be applied anywhere, etc. All for One wanted this. Izuku grinned back at the crazed man and clenched his fists. "Try me." Chapter 43. Jet Burn. Dabi screamed as he attacked Shoto. Shoto blocked the fire attack from Dabi and started to use his ice to cool himself and his older brother down. "Toya, stop." Shoto froze Dabi and looked at him as Dabi smiled back. Fire burst through the ice and Shoto is sent flying backwards. Shoto, the perfect child. Toya's skin started to melt off of his face, his skeleton shining through. "Little brother, you were made to replace me." Dabi started to make fire appear around him. The whole area heated up. "No matter the reason I was made, now my purpose." Shoto started to heat up his own flames. "My purpose now is to stop you." His flames shot up into the air and Dabi smiled at the sight. "I'll kill you and bring your body to Dad in hell." Dabi jumped into the air. Prominence burn. Dabi used his father's move again. Flash fire fist. Shoto yells using his own version of his father's attack. A few blocks down, Overhaul was fighting against Bakugo and Ida. "Katsuki, are you sure we should have left Shoto with Dabi?" Ida asks while the blonde boy explodes some of the debris flying at him. "That's a family matter, none of our business." Bakugo points his gauntlets at Overhaul. AP shot. Bakugo sends explosions flying at the man who stumbles back but keeps his balance. Ida grits his teeth and activates his engines. He speeds up to Overhaul, kicking his face into the ground below them. Overhaul grit his teeth. "I'm gonna kill you both." Ochako watched as her father hit Shigaraki in his small form. Dad, no. Ochako watched as Shigaraki sent tendrils through All Might. "Dad," Ochako stumbled to her feet and almost instantly activated 100% of One for All, dashing at Shigaraki, punching him in the neck. Shigaraki flew 50 feet through a building. Dad," Ochako looked back to All Might, who was on the ground with blood pouring out of his chest. And no, Ochako looked to Eri, who had her eyes widened. Ochako noticed Shigaraki with his hand on her head and a huge smile on her face. "Rewind is mine," Shigaraki said as he took Eri's quirk. Eri screamed in pain as her quirk left her body. Ochako looked over to Aizawa, who had tears running down his face but his quirk still activated. "You either cancelled decay, or cancelled all for one." Shigaraki talks to Aizawa, who grits his teeth. "Either saving her life, or saving her quirk." Shigaraki started to laugh. "Can't do both." Shigaraki continued to laugh as he looked back to the barely alive All Might and Ochako. "And I finally killed All Might." His laugh continued as he seemed to lose his mind even more than he already had. A tiny horn appeared on Shigaraki's head. "Bringing this girl here was a mistake, Eraserhead." Shigaraki slowly stopped laughing as the other watched in awe while Eri fell to the ground unconscious. "So not cool." Shigaraki smirked. Izuku ran at All for One with his whole body covered in the spear-like bones. He cranked back his arm and activated hypertrophy, making the arm at least 10 times larger. All of a sudden, All for One disappeared. Izuku stared at where the man had been and looked around. All for One appeared at the fight with Shigaraki and grabbed the man's head. "I feel that you've received a quirk I've wanted for quite a long time, Tamura." All for One used his quirk and took Rewind from Shigaraki. Before All for One could leave, he spotted All Might slowly losing life. He smiled and used his black goop quirk to send Shigaraki to where Izuku was. "I'll kill that brat later. For now, let's see what we have here." All for One started to laugh. "Tashinori, oh how far you've fallen." All for One started to walk toward the man. All Might tried to sit up but couldn't muster up the strength. "I saved people until the last moment, All for One." All Might grinned as he stared at the sky. "Dee, don't talk like that please, Dad, don't die." Ochako looked over her father with a worried face. "Please come back home to me and Mom," Ochako begged. All for One grinned while hearing her pleas. "You're naive, ninth." All for One stabs her in the sides with his finger tendrils, and she falls onto her back coughing up blood. She rolls over onto her stomach and crawls to All Might. "Dad, please don't leave me." All Might turned his head to her and smiles. "Ochako, I truly wish I never condemned you for being a vigilante. You were a real hero through and through." The light in All Might's eyes started to fade. "Dad, please." Ochako's voice cracked. All for One reached All Might's feet and Ochako looked up at the man with horror in her eyes. "I truly wish I were the one to deliver the final blow," All for One said while looking over to Ochako. "Of course he would die with a smile on his face. That's so like him." Ochako got up and punched All for One in the face. The man laughed in response. "Not even going to use one for all when hitting me? Little girl, I put your father into the hospital during his prime, and I could have done more," All for One told Ochako, who just looked back at her father. All Might was dead. Ochako felt tears stream down her face and she closed her eyes. Dad, she tried so hard not to cry. Her eyes opened and a pink aura surrounded her, the pink black whips slowly surrounding her body. All for One. Ochako remembered her childhood. Even though All Might was a hero, he made time for his family. After the first battle with All for One, he had been bedridden for a few months and made the best of it by deepening the bond with his family. She remembered the day he offered her one for all. The training it took for her body to be able to handle it. Ochako got in a fighting stance. Be prepared to fight. She remembered training with him, and at one point finally being able to hold her own in a spar. All of the birthdays, all of the anniversaries with her mom, all of the good times, all of the bad. They were in the past. She would never get anything like that again. You better be prepared to lose. Ochako breathed in heavily. And that's because... A smile formed on her face similar to her father's iconic smile. I am here. Chapter 44. Shigaraki appeared in the USJ and saw Izuku in front of him. Shigaraki, Izuku yelled out while jumping backwards. Shigaraki grit his teeth as the horn on his head disappeared. Damn it, Shigaraki punched the ground and it all broke up into pieces. Izuku jumped up and Shigaraki glared at the boy. Shigaraki used decay on the ground and the surrounding area immediately became dust. Izuku had kept himself up using float. He breathed a sigh of relief as Shigaraki flew at him. Damn you! Shigaraki held out his first, but Izuku used impact recoil. It completely countered the punch and Shigaraki flew backwards, hitting the ground and causing dust to stir up in the area. Izuku saw an outline of Shigaraki. Must be search, Izuku thought to himself while shooting the rivet tendrils out of his palm. He heard them connect and got ripped toward Shigaraki, the dust dispersing away from them. Izuku looked to Shigaraki to see the tendrils still inside of him, but him pulling Izuku toward him using them. Izuku retracted the tendrils before he could be too close to Shigaraki. Izuku tapped his fingers together and activated gearshift on himself. He wasn't 100% sure how the quirk worked, but all he knew is he went incredibly fast, faster than light possibly. Izuku shot at Shigaraki and punched him in the nose, shattering it. Shigaraki held his face. Damn it. A shattered nose doesn't feel so good, does it? Izuku smirks at Shigaraki, who growls. I'm gonna murder you. Shigaraki's nose started to regenerate, but Izuku activated erasure. Shigaraki's eyes widened as Izuku's smirk turned to a smile. Got you. Izuku charged Shigaraki and Shigaraki raised his hand and swung down as Izuku neared. Izuku brought himself to a halt with gearshift and avoided the hit. The ground started to decay again and Izuku made sure he was floating. Shigaraki smiled as he kicked the ground. Izuku flinched as dust came toward his eyes. Izuku clutched his eyes closed, deactivating erasure. Shigaraki's nose immediately regenerated. Try again, Shigaraki laughed as Izuku floated up higher in the air and rubbed his eyes. Damn it, he thought to himself before getting punched in the gut and flying up through the roof of the USJ. He opened his eyes and looked around. A hole in his stomach quickly regenerated. He heard an explosion and looked over to see a building crumbling as three figures fought on top. Izuku used his robotic eye to zoom in and saw Bakugo and Ida fighting Overhaul. Katsuki, Ida called out to Bakugo, who had just blown off one of Overhaul's arms. Four eyes, this is life or death, and I'm not losing to some villain. Ochako fought with 50% of her power. Bakugo's inferiority complex shined through for a moment, as Overhaul screamed in pain. The building quickly fell out beneath them and Ida dashed at Bakugo, flying the two onto the ground. Are you alright, Katsuki? Ida asked the explosive boy as he ripped himself out of Ida's grip. Yeah, I'm good. Where'd Overhaul go? Bakugo looks around until hearing a loud crash. The two heroes in training look over to see Overhaul on the ground unconscious. The two walked over to him before a green spark appears in front of them. Izuku stands over Overhaul's body and stares at the man. I can't let Shigaraki get this quirk. Izuku puts his hand over Overhaul's face and uses all for one. Deku, Bakugo calls to the boy who just glances over to him. Kakanida? The boy looks surprised. Run! Izuku finishes taking Overhaul's quirk and disappears from their view. Did he just steal Overhaul's quirk? Ida yells out of character. Bakugo glances behind him and sees the USJ. They were fighting in there. Bakugo sees the huge hole that was created after Izuku got sent flying out of the top. We need to help him, he'll die if he fights alone, Ida urgently says while attempting to run to the USJ. Bakugo grabs his shoulder. We need to help Shoto, we'd only be getting in the way of Deku and Ochako. Bakugo looked as Izuku neared the USJ again. Meanwhile, Shoto and Dabi were still going back and forth with their fire attacks. Toya, Shoto yelled as the two's fists clashed. Toya was nothing but clothes and a skeleton at this point. What kept him alive was a mystery. Toya had been almost nonverbal since his jaw had almost completely fallen off. The stitches of Dr. Garaki from so many years ago finally breaking. Shoto felt skin start to melt on his hands as Toya cranked up the heat again. Shoto winced in pain but pushed farther, slowly cooling himself off with ice to stop his skin from melting. Shoto kept trying to balance his output of fire and ice. He felt his blood circulating faster through his body, and he felt a cold breeze from himself. He looked at his flames that were higher than ever, but they weren't orange, they were blue, not because of how hot they were, but because of how cold. Shoto's eyes widened as Dabi's body was engulfed with the cold flames. Dabi put his other hand up and put his jaw into place before laughing. Shoto looked at his brother. Rest now, brother. Shoto overflowed the whole block with the ice-cold flames. Dabi continued to laugh. Brother, the broken man started. I have a resilience to ice, shouldn't you know this? Dabi shot his hot flames through the streets. The flames danced around, catching building on fire and anything else in their way. Shoto grit his teeth. Fine, then how about the opposite? Shoto closed his eyes as he heard his brother laugh. Out of his right side came a huge glacier. It was hot to the touch, almost as hot as Endeavor's flames. Dabi's eyes widened as he was encapsulated in the glacier. Shoto started to scream out loud as he looked at his brother. Glacier Hephaestus. Chapter 45. You seriously think that stupid catchphrase would make me nervous or something? All for One grinned at Ochako. Ochako kept the smile on her face. She couldn't let him break her spirit. A horn appeared on All for One's head. Let me fill you in on my plan. All for One started to laugh. I'm gonna use rewind, and rewind myself to nothing. All for One says, surprising Ochako, who just braces herself. Once I'm done, I'll fully take over Tamura's body. All for One's grin widened. And then it'll become the most powerful being the world has ever seen. All for One yelled while losing his usually calm demeanor. But first, the man yelled as he starts to rewind. I am gonna take that quirk of yours and it'll become the demon lord with it. All for One used their cannon and shot himself toward Ochako. Ochako grit her teeth and prepared to take the hit, but objects flew in and stabbed All for One in the throat. All for One stopped in his tracks and the wounds quickly closed because of the rewind quirk. Sorry we're so late, got caught up with some things. Hawks landed next to Ochako and smiled at the young woman. Hawks. Ochako looked at the man who had recently been bumped up to the number 3 hero right above Best Jeanist. The two had fought before while Ochako was a vigilante. Hawks was one of the only heroes who could almost keep up with Ochako. Not enough to catch her though. Ochako hears a thump and turns around to see Endeavor. Whoa! Ochako almost stumbles back but keeps her footing. Ochako Uraraka, we are here for support as of ordered by the Hero Commission. Endeavor glares at her. Ochako had also had multiple run-ins with Endeavor while she was a vigilante. Endeavor could never catch Ochako, and majority of the time wasn't even close. This hurt the man's ego. Ochako looked back to All for One, who laughed. Done monologuing? He asked the group as he ripped Hawk's feathers out of his neck. The wounds once again healed and Hawk and Endeavor got in fighting stances. Ochako smiled again, also getting into a fighting stance. All for One activates spear-like bones and runs at the 3 heroes. Endeavor and Hawk separate, and Ochako jumps up. All for One's punch connects with the ground, making it shake. Hypertrophy makes All for One's arm grow in size. You stupid heroes don't have a chance. All for One glares up at Ochako, and she uses Black Whip, wrapping it around All for One's neck. We have to hold him off until he's gone. All for One rips Black Whip off of him, and Ochako flies down at him. Before she can land a punch, Hawks flies in and brings her to the side. You're the 9th, right? Hawks says with a smile as Ochako's eyes widen. How do you know? Ochako starts while staring at Hawks. Almight told us before we got here. Right now the best plan of action is for you to recoup your energy, because if he fuses with Shigaraki you're gonna need to be at close to full power to fight him. Hawks looks down and sees Endeavor and All for One exchanging punches. Prominence burn. Endeavor burned All for One. He pushed past his limit, and his flames became blue. All for One's body started to become nothing but ash, and regeneration brought him back. He was younger this time, maybe in his 50s. All for One grit his teeth, and he swung at Endeavor, grabbing onto his face. Enji Todoroki, the yellow light of rewind started to bring Endeavor back in age. Hawks shot his wings at All for One, and stopped him from fully rewinding Endeavor. Endeavor fell backward and hit the ground. He had rewinded to about 25 years old. Damn it, he yelled out as flames shot from his whole body. Do they also go back mentally or only physically? Ochako thought while thinking of Shigaraki and Tenko. If Izuku has almost every quirk that he's in close proximity to, then that must mean Ochako thinks to when Izuku and Eri were helping All Might. Ochako thinks to the tiny boy inside of Shigaraki and her eyes widen. I can save him. Izuku dodged a wild punch from Shigaraki and elbowed him in the jaw, breaking it completely. I have some sort of strength enhancement quirk. Izuku looked at Shigaraki, whose jaw quickly regenerates. You're so annoying. Shigaraki grit his teeth and grabbed Izuku's foot. He slammed Izuku into the ground and stomped on his stomach, creating a huge hole. Izuku held back tears as pain shot through his entire body. He started to regenerate, but Shigaraki's foot was still where he was regenerating. His eyes widened and Shigaraki grinned. Now you can't run from me. Shigaraki slammed his fists into Izuku's face, crushing his nose and jaw. He did this over and over again. Damn it, Izuku thought, barely staying conscious as regeneration rushed to heal him. Shigaraki stopped for a moment, and his grin widened. Gearshift can control anything I touch, right? Izuku's face quickly regenerated and he had a smile on. Shigaraki looked at him confused before Izuku reached out and touched Shigaraki. Shigaraki went to hit Izuku again but found he couldn't move at all. What the hell? He growled while being stuck in place. Izuku started to laugh a bit, mostly out of relief. Shigaraki glared at the boy. Izuku touched him again and boosted his speed. Shigaraki couldn't react and flew through the front of the USJ faster than the eye could see. His leg ripped off and Izuku grunted in pain. He stood up and ripped Shigaraki's leg out of him, the wound quickly healing. He felt a shiver down his spine. What is that? Explosions flew around the USJ. Izuku's eyes widened. Bakugo. We need to help Midoriya. You really think he stands a chance against Shigaraki alone? Ida begs Bakugo, who tries to walk away. We will only get in the way. Bakugo insisted before Ida grabbed his shoulder, ripping Bakugo back to look at him. Katsuki, he's your best friend, we need to help him. Ida stared down at the boy, who was a few inches shorter. Bakugo ripped himself out of Ida's grip and looked at the USJ before launching himself at it. TCH, damn it, let's go. Chapter 46. Cluster. Bakugo shot his explosions at Shigaraki, sending the man flying back into the USJ. For eyes, let's go. Bakugo started to use his explosions to shoot himself at Shigaraki and Izuku. Ida used his engine to keep up and arrived next to Bakugo and Izuku. Izuku noticed Ida, who smiled back to him. We're here to help you, Midoriya. Ida told the boy, who was still smiling. Thank you, Izuku tells the two boys. Strings fly in and wrap up Shigaraki. The three boys look over to see Best Jeanist and Shoto Todoroki. Shoto was in decent condition as he had a small window to recuperate after defeating his brother. Bakugo smiled as he saw Best Jeanist. Sorry I took so long, I had to finish evacuating civilians. Best Jeanist split Shigaraki into multiple pieces. He quickly regenerated and looked around. Shigaraki smiled. Looks like you have the numbers advantage. Shigaraki directs at Izuku, who grins back at him. Izuku chuckled as the rest of the heroes stood by his side. I told your other body this early. Izuku started with Shigaraki's eyes widening. Izuku raises his hand and beckons Shigaraki toward him with a crazed grin. Try me. Ochako jumped down at All for One and wrapped Black Whip around his arms. Endeavor used this and activated Flash Fire Fist, smashing it through All for One's torso. All for One's regeneration being activate makes him de-age faster. The three heroes had come to that conclusion and started bombarding him with devastating attacks. Ochako was mostly a setup role here so that she didn't have to overexert her body before All for One and Shigaraki fused. All for One shot rivet tendrils at Ochako, and she easily avoided thanks to the fourth's quirk shooting through her head, telling her to dodge before the tendrils even activated. Hawk sent his wings into All for One's eyes and All for One ripped them out. The horrifying sight of his eyeless eye sockets making Ochako hesitate. All she could think of was the USJ with Izuku, a similar sight. Black Whip retracted and All for One grinned as he shot tendrils into Endeavor and Hawks, pinning both of them to separate walls. No.1 watched in horror as both Hawks and Endeavor struggled to move. "You can't help us, if he gets you we'll all die," Endeavor screams at Ochako, who hesitates. "Damn it," she mumbles as she starts to lose hope. Suddenly she hears a chuckle. Someone appears behind All for One with a huge grin on his face. Ochako's eyes widen and a smile forms on her face. "Mirio!" Ochako yells out as Mirio hits All for One in the back of the head, screaming, "Power!" All for One grits his teeth and turns around, swiping his hand at the boy who uses his quirk to become untouchable. "Ochako, it's been a while." Mirio lands next to the girl and she smiles at him. He towered over her, the now grown man being at least 6 foot. "It has no time to talk, though we have a fight to win." Ochako stood her ground and clenched her fist, getting into a fighting position. Yeah, Mirio disappeared under the ground. "That brat won't stop me," All for One said before dodging fire from Endeavor. "You talk a lot." Endeavor launched himself at All for One, who put up his hand. Ochako shot Black Whip at the man and restrained his hands, pulling them to the side. Endeavor landed the flash fire fist and All for One flew backwards. Mirio appeared behind All for One as he flew back and kicked him into the ground. Hawks used his wings to pin All for One into the ground. Endeavor jumped up and looked down at the man. "Prominence burn," he yelled while landing on All for One and holding him down. All for One's body burned beyond recognition, but the man was laughing in the meantime. All for One de-aged again. The now young teen version of the man smiled at the group. He was even younger than Ochako. "This has been fun, and I wish I could have done more before leaving this body." All for One started to laugh. "Goodbye, one for all." All for One started to glow. Ochako's eyes widened. Hawks and Endeavor ran toward Ochako, knowing that she was their only way to win. "Ochako, watch out. You have your little hero friends around." Shigaraki smiled at the group of heroes that had accumulated in front of him. "Where's the fun in playing fair?" Izuku smirked at Shigaraki, whose smile faded. Shigaraki's body suddenly started to change. His muscles seemed to overgrow his body. The smile on his face returned, but it didn't seem like Shigaraki's smile. It looked more like All for One. "What the hell is happening to that thing?" Bakugo braced himself while standing next to Izuku. Izuku looked at Bakugo. "That airy girl's quirk is rewind, and if I'm right about how my quirk works." Izuku started to glow yellow and a horn appeared on his forehead. The light transferred to Bakugo, who grunted in pain. "The hell are you doing?" Bakugo yelled in pain as Shigaraki looked at him. He seemed intrigued. "You have the girl's quirk as well." All for One smiled as his face became more prominent. Bakugo's arm returned to his body and Izuku stopped using rewind. "How the hell?" Bakugo yelled, looking at his arm and immediately making an explosion. Bakugo smirked. "Hell yeah." Izuku looked back to Shigaraki, who now looked more like a giant. "You'll never be able to kill me." A mix of All for One and Shigaraki's voices came through the creature's mouth. Izuku chuckles and Shigaraki looks at him confused. "The hell is so funny?" Shigaraki clenched his oversized fists. "The bigger you are." Izuku got back into a fighting stance. "The more opportunities there are to hit you." Izuku smirked and shot himself forward. He started something that was long overdue. The final battle. Chapter 47. Dark Shadow. All for One exploded and his body completely disintegrated. Ochako, who had put her hands over her head, looked up and saw Tokoyami covering her, and the other heroes with Dark Shadow. This put Dark Shadow completely out of commission as his weakness was light. Ochako looked around and saw the rest of the former Class 1A, Tokoyami, Tsu, Jiro, Kaminari, Kirishima, Mina, Ojiro, Hagakure, who was somehow visible, Momo, Shoji, Kuda, Sato, Siro, and a boy with purple balls as hair. "Who the hell are you?" Ochako looked at the boy, who all of a sudden made the most horrifically ugly face at her. "You don't remember me." Tears flowed down Mineta's eyes. Ochako immediately recognized him now. "Mineta?" The boy had grown, a lot. Tch yeah. He looked away while Kaminari patted him on the back. Don't worry, buddy, you'll be fine. He insisted with Mineta just ignoring him. Ochako shook her head and looked around as dark shadow retracted to Tokoemi's body. She grit her teeth. Danger sense then went off and Ochako looked over to the right and saw a huge explosion shoot through the top of the USJ. I think I know where they are, Ochako muttered before turning back to the class. Let's go, guys. She looked at the USJ and they all started running toward it while yelling. Right. Howitzer impact. Bakugo spun in the air toward Shigaraki, who had a big smile on his face. Insignificant. All for One's voice shot through Shigaraki's body, but it soon switched back to Shigaraki's normal voice as Shigaraki's smile became crazed. You're weak. Shigaraki put his hand out to catch Bakugo, but Izuku used erasure, turning off whatever quirk Shigaraki was using. Shigaraki smirked. You only erase the quirk that's active when you use erasure. All for One's voice shone through again. Before Bakugo could hit Shigaraki, Ida flew in and backflipped, kicked Shigaraki's hand up into the air, which made Shigaraki lose his balance. Bakugo hit him with the howitzer impact, and as regeneration started, Izuku activated erasure. Half of Shigaraki's head was unrecognizable. It more resembled All for One after the All Might fight years prior. That quirk is the most important to erase. Izuku smiled at the man who glared back at him. Best Jeanist wrapped strings around Shigaraki and ripped at them, but nothing happened this time. Shigaraki had insanely tough skin. Shoto slid on his eyes toward Shigaraki. Flash Fire Fist, the boy yelled out loud before punching Shigaraki, who burst into flames. As Shigaraki burned, he flailed his arms before jumping backwards. He stomped on the ground, making dust kick up and stop erasure. There's no point in using the quirk. He has ways to counter because of the terrain. Ida tells Izuku, who nods in agreement. If we're gonna do this, we're gonna have to break through his regeneration and put out enough damage to fully end him. Izuku muttered. He didn't want to kill, but at this point it felt like the only solution, as he doubted that he could knock Shigaraki unconscious. Even if he did, he didn't think the prisons in the surrounding area could handle Shigaraki with their states. A hole appeared in the USJ and Izuku immediately looked over to see the rest of Class 3A, followed by Endeavor, Hawks, and Mirio. Ochako. Izuku smiled as the girl used One for All to dash at Shigaraki. Shigaraki and All for One now inhabit the same body. Ochako yelled as she neared Shigaraki, who looked over to the girl with a grin. One for All. Shigaraki and All for One's voices said to the girl as he reached out his hand. Izuku appeared next to Shigaraki and punched him in the face. Ochako then bashed Shigaraki's nose in. Shigaraki flew backwards and onto his back. Izuku, I know how to beat him. Ochako started but was punched away by Shigaraki, who then glared at Izuku. That's not gonna happen. The man reached down and activated Decay before Izuku could cancel it out. Shit. Izuku cussed as he jumped up and turned back to see the others, who were picked up by Ochako's black whip. Ochako floated while wiping blood off of her mouth. I can't hold them for long, but while I do, this is your fight, Izuku. Ochako told the boy, who then looked back to Shigaraki, who was smiling. Izuku grit his teeth again. Nice try, he told the man as he activated spear-like bones on his arm, and then using hypertrophy to make his arm huge. You've mastered my quirks pretty quickly. All for One's voice left Shigaraki. Izuku smirked. I guess I got your genius quirk too, eh? The boy said as wings sprouted out of his back. Hawk's quirk, the boy thinks to himself as the red wings continue to sprout. He flies toward Shigaraki and Shigaraki does that same. You're dead. Shigaraki shoots the rivet tendrils out of his fingers and Izuku flies around them. Izuku smiles at the man and shoots tendrils of his own out of his right hand as his left arm becomes bigger. Shigaraki dodges to the left, but as he does, he's met with the bone-covered arm of Izuku that punctures his side. Blood splatters everywhere as regeneration quickly starts to heal Shigaraki. Izuku hits him again, and the regeneration slows. If anyone's gonna die here, it's you. Izuku smiles as Ochako appears behind Shigaraki and kicks him in the side of the head. Izuku, use rewind. Ochako tells Izuku, whose eyes widen. If I do that, then he'll be back to before he had All for One. Izuku looks over to Shigaraki, who becomes even more angry. You hitch, Shigaraki flies at the two, but Ochako evades, jumping back to the group of heroes. Izuku, on the other hand, has a yellow glow surround him. He had started to use rewind. Shigaraki noticed this and immediately backed away. Shit, the man thought to himself as he turned away. He soon realized he was surrounded by heroes. This time it's for real. Izuku clenched his fists as he nears Shigaraki, who tries to escape but is bombarded with attacks. This is the end. Izuku touches the man's head and activates Erasure to ensure he doesn't use a quirk. Shigaraki. Chapter 48. Shigaraki looked around at the heroes and panic finally set in. He felt his body changing due to rewind and grit his teeth. No, not after all of my hard work. All for One's voice flew out of Shigaraki's mouth. All for One, this body isn't yours, your reign of terror is over. Rewind came into effect, but Shigaraki tried to run. First he was met with a kick from Ida, sending him into the air. Recipro burst, the boy yelled while Shigaraki got thrown into the air by the kick. Shoto slammed his foot onto the ground. Heaven-piercing ice wall. The boy yelled as a wall of ice shot up and captured Shigaraki. Bakugo put his hands to the ground and activated his explosion, shooting himself up the ice wall and right in front of Shigaraki's face. Die, you bastard! The boy started to use his explosions to spin himself around. Howitzer impact. The attack heavily affected Shigaraki as he was now almost limp. Behind Bakugo flew Ochako, who had flung herself off of the ice wall. Memories flooded Ochako. The first time she had seen Shigaraki, she never thought he'd amount to this. The crusty blue-haired man, he had turned into a full-fledged monster. The mall incident, the overhaul incident, 2 whole years of being a vigilante because of him and the League. She hated him, yet all she wanted to do was. The vision of little Tenko within All for One appeared back in her mind. Save him. All for One, give Tenko back and go to hell. Ochako pulled her fists back and used Fa Gene to punch Shigaraki in the face as hard as she could. Something in Shigaraki's eyes had changed as regeneration stopped working. Get this off of me, Shigaraki said while trying to move. There was no remaining tone in his voice that was similar to All for One. Shigaraki, Izuku called out to the man who looked over to him. Where's my master? Shigaraki yelled out to Izuku, who smiled. Let up the ice wall. Izuku ordered Shoto, who made the ice disappear. Ochako grabbed Shigaraki with Black Whip and brought him down to Izuku's level. All for One, if you're still in there. Izuku got close to Shigaraki. It's been a long time coming. Ochako appeared next to Izuku. After generations of my quirk, we finally defeated you. Ochako had a huge smile on her face. You did all you could to ruin the lives of innocent people, but we aren't gonna let you do that anymore. Shigaraki looked at the two as tears flowed down his face. You're in the way of my dream. The man grit his teeth as he reached out his hand. Izuku used Erasure and Shigaraki looked at his hand. Why won't it? You really are gone, aren't you, All for One? Izuku looked at Shigaraki, who looked back at him. Why the hell are you talking about my master? Izuku looked at the now teenage boy. Ochako smiled. Tamyara Shigaraki. Goodbye. The boy's eyes close and the glow of rewind blinds everyone as it powers up. A few seconds of silence go by. The lights stop emitting from Izuku and everyone looks around. On the floor in front of Ochako and Izuku laid a black-haired boy. Tenko Shimura. Izuku called out, the young boy's head shot up. Where am I? The boy mumbled as he looked at the surrounding heroes. Ochako looked at the boy and smiled. I did it. Nana. Ochako was taken into the One for All realm. Nana paused. Ochako Uraraka, daughter of the 8th, you have completed One for All. You defeated All for One. Nana told the girl, who had now fully become visible in the One for All realm. We appreciate your work and sacrifices. The rest of the users bowed down. Ochako smiled at the group of vestiges. Thank you, she told the group. Ochako. A familiar voice said behind the girl, whose eyes widened. She turned around. Dad, she looked at All Might's vestige. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you to celebrate, but you did what I couldn't do, you and Izuku Midoriya. You completed the mission I gave you the moment you inherited One for All. All Might told the girl before bowing down. Thank you, he said while Ochako started to cry. Dad, she said again while running to the man and hugging him. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, I'm so sorry. Ochako bawled her eyes out, but All Might just smiled. Don't apologize, Ochako, we did what we had to save the world. All Might patted the back of her head. Rest now, he told the girl as she left the One for All realm and passed out due to her injuries. Izuku watched as the girl started falling and quickly ran up to catch her. He looked down at the beaten and battered girl. He was surprised to see she had a smile on her face. What happened to her? Tenko walked up to Izuku while looking at the girl. Izuku looked at Tenko and chucked. Maybe we'll tell you when you're older, kid. Izuku looked back to Ochako and hoisted her onto his back. Everyone, he called out to the group of heroes who all had a sense of relief flow over them when Tenko started to act like a normal child. They all looked at him. Let's get out of here, Izuku said before grabbing Tenko. Well, wait, what are we doing? Tenko looked at the boy who smiled. Don't worry, kid, you're safe, just hold on. Izuku sprouted hawk's wings and started flying. All of the heroes followed him as they made their ways back to UA. I'm finally out of captivity. All for One and Shigaraki are gone. We defeated the villains, now what? With what was next up in the air, the heroes returned to UA. The sun set behind them as the day came to a close. Chapter 49. Ochako woke up and looked around her. She saw Recovery Girl at her desk typing something on the computer. Recovery Girl? Ochako almost yelled but stopped because she felt a sharp pain shoot through her torso. The woman turned back to her and perked up. Oh my, you're awake! Recovery Girl rushed over to Ochako and started to check her vitals. Ochako held her stomach as tears flowed down her face. The pain was excruciating. The hell happened to me? The girl mumbled while trying to keep her composure. Adrenaline is the only thing that kept you alive during your fights, Recovery Girl told Ochako as she put a glass of water and a few pills on the table next to Ochako. Ochako looks the two items but just stared at Recovery Girl. I shouldn't be alive is what you're saying? She asks the older woman, who nods and brings out a chart. 4 fractured ribs, 2 of which punctured your left lung. All 4 of your limbs are broken, severe concussions, cut all over causing severe blood loss. She reads out as Ochako's eyes widen and she looks at the arm she used to hold her stomach. Then how am I moving this? She said out loud before pain shot through her arm. Gah, she yelped as Recovery Girl sighed. Reflexes, I guess. The woman answers as she grabs the water and puts it in front of Ochako's mouth. Ochako takes a sip and Recovery Girl puts the pills in her mouth. Begrudging, the girl swallows the pills. Ugh, she groaned. Those will calm the pain for a bit. Recovery Girl backed up and looked at the girl as she closed her eyes. Is everyone else okay? Ochako asked the woman, who chuckled. Yes, everyone recovered relatively quickly besides you. Ochako groaned again. Where is everyone anyways? Ochako thought of Izuku and a smile appeared on her face. He's finally back with us, she thought to herself as Recovery Girl started to speak. Your class is graduating right now, Deku is there with them. Recovery Girl told Ochako and her eyes widened. Wait, how long was I asleep? Ochako asks with Recovery Girl sighing. It's March and you've been out since December. Recovery Girl tells Ochako, whose eyes widen. Wait, so I'm 18 now, right? Ochako questions with Recovery Girl just nodding. Ochako starts to think about everyone, but especially her mother. Where's my mom? Ochako asks Recovery Girl, but as she does the door bursts open. Ochako's mom stood in the door with tears flying from her eyes. Ochako smiled as she started crying as well. Mom. Izuku watched as the students of Class 3A walked toward the stage. President Mike stood on the podium with a smile on his face. And finally, last but not least, the heroes of Class 3A. President Mike started to announce. Here to speak is Class 3A's representative, Tenya Ida. President Mike announced. Ida walked onto the podium and President Mike handed him the microphone. The microphone peaked, causing a loud noise to ring throughout the graduation ceremony. These past 3 years have been interesting for all of us, to say the least. Ida joked, with the crowd in front of him responding well to the small joke. Well, I never thought I'd be doing something like this. I went from being an uptight boy back in first year to, well, this. Ida rubbed the back of his head. I actually have a request. Ida looks over to Izuocha, who nods. Izuku Midoriya, can you please come to the stage? Ida looks at Izuku, who is taken back. Izuku stands up and walks up past the class, who all pat him on the back while he's on his way up to the podium. Hi. Izuku muttered into the microphone. I'm Izuku Midoriya. My hero name is Deku. The crowd watches him. His mom had tears in her eyes as she held Tamura. The boy had become Izuku's adoptive younger brother, not legally, but it was all but confirmed. I entered Class 1A as a Quirkless student, the only one in U.A actually. Izuku paused, not sure how to continue. The USJ training incident is when I unlocked my quirk. At first I thought it was an explosion quirk similar to one of my classmates, but recently I found out the true nature of my quirk. My quirk is proximity power. The quirks in my general vicinity will merge with mine. At one point the downside is I'd pick up whatever personality the quirk's original owner had, but at some point that went away. I also found out that after a quirk's original user dies, I no longer can use said quirk. Izuku looks at his hand and tries to activate All for One. Nothing happens. Due to this I've lost a few pretty good quirks. But it's better in the long run. Izuku chuckles. In the middle of our first year I was actually taken by the League of Villains, although you guys probably know that already. I was held captive for a little over 2 years. During that time my former classmates all grew as people and heroes. Izuku smiled at his former class, and they all smiled back. Once I was found, another former student turned vigilante. Ochako Uraraka was the one to find me. She had started fighting All for One and gotten thrown into the building I was in. Izuku chuckled while remembering. That's when the war started. The subject was sensitive for some, but Izuku had all the right to speak of it. Ochako saved me from All for One and Shigaraki. So did All Might. Sadly, as we know, All Might didn't make it out alive. Izuku's tone became darker, as the crowd became visibly sad. Tashinori Yagi, the man who single-handed lowered the crime rates for 40 years. My idol, the reason I wanted to become a hero and ended up becoming one in the first place. Izuku felt tears well up in his eyes. Thank you, All Might, wherever you are, and if you can hear me, thank you. Izuku tried to hold back his tears but couldn't help himself. Oh, sorry. Izuku tried to laugh it off as the crowd started clapping for him. Izuku breathed in heavily while looking around the crowd. Suddenly he looked at the door to the auditorium and saw Ochako standing there on crutches. The girl was bawling her eyes out, and Izuku's widened. The class here in front of you is full of some of the strongest heroes the world will ever see. It would be my honor to appoint the person who I want to announce the names. Izuku looked over to Izuocha, who nodded. Ochako Uraraka. Izuku's voice cracked and he laughed. Would you come up here and announce the names of the graduates? He completely let his tears loose as Ochako nodded and, with help from her mother, neared the stage. Ochako got up onto the stage. Hi, I'm Ochako Uraraka. The crowd was silent. She looks at her mother, who nods. I'm All Might's daughter. The girl admits. The crowd starts to murmur. I was in a coma since the end of the war. I only woke up maybe 30 minutes ago. Ochako laughed a bit. Izuku, thank you for wanting me to do this. Ochako looks at Izuku, who smiles and nods. Here goes nothing. Ochako looks down to the list. Yuga Oyama. Oyama walked up to the stage and was presented a diploma along with his hero license. The boy bowed to present Mike and the rest of the teachers that had gathered. He also smiled at Ochako. A chair was there with a photo of All Might on it to commemorate his contributions not only to U.A but also to the Heroes Society. Mina Ishido. Mina walked onto the stage with tears in her eyes. I miss you, Ochako, the girl says to Ochako while receiving her diploma and hero license. Ochako smiled at the girl and nodded. See you, Adri. Tsu walked onto the stage and looked to Ochako, who couldn't help but smile and try and wave. Tsu waved back. Katsuki Bikugo. Ochako looks over to the boy who walks onto the stage. He looked at Ochako and grinned. He walked past Mike and Aizawa and hugged Ochako, who was taken by surprise. Missed you, kid. Bakugo smiled as an awe was heard throughout the crowd. Izuku smiled at his childhood friend. How vastly he had changed over the years was admirable. Soon after the war, Bakugo finally revealed to Izuku why he had changed in freshman year. Izuku was very surprised to find out that it was Bakugo in the first place who saved his life when he jumped, but it was nice to finally know why. Toru Hagakure. The invisible girl turned herself visible and waved at her parents. She ran up and grabbed her stuff before putting her hand out to Ochako, who hesitantly shook it, trying not to fall off of the crutches. Tenya Ida. Ochako looked over and the boy walked closer. Thank you, Uraraka. Ida smiled at the girl, who nodded and smiled back. Ida saluted to her while walking away. Kyokajiro. The girl walked up and smiled at Ochako while waving. Thank you, she whispered as she took her diploma and hero license. Denki Kaminari. The yellow-haired boy posed as he walked up and took his diploma and hero license before putting his phone in the air and taking a selfie with Ochako. Good to see ya, hero. Kaminari waved at Ochako while walking off stage. Eijiro Kurishima. The red-haired boy walked onto the stage with tears flowing down his face. He took his diploma and hero license before walking over to Ochako and bowing. So manly, he sobbed. Ochako smiled. Good job, Kurishima. She told the boy, who nodded and walked off stage. Koji Koda. The tall boy walked onto stage and rushed across. He was still insanely shy. He glanced at Ochako. Good job, he mumbled before walking off of the stage. Ochako just smiled. Minoru Mineta. The purple-haired boy walked on stage. Izuku and Ochako weren't used to seeing him as a taller boy that wasn't insanely perverted. Thanks, Uraraka. The boy thanked her while bowing before walking away. Names went by and soon Ochako was down to the last three. Shoto Todoroki. She looked over to the half-hot, half-cold boy who walked toward her with a grin. I'm happy you're back, Uraraka. Shoto told the girl, who chuckled. If only I was back before graduation, right? She said, making the boy snicker. Yeah. He walked off the stage. Fumikage Tokoyami. The dark shadow user walked up and took his diploma and hero license. Uraraka, class hadn't been the same since you and Midoriya left. I'm happy you guys are safe. The boy told her, and she just smiled and nodded. Momo Yayorosa. The tall raven-haired girl walked onto stage. She received both of her awards and walked to Ochako. You skipped two of us. Momo smiled. Ochako looked around confused. What? She asked the girl. Aizawa walked up to Ochako and looked at Izuku, beckoning him to come over. What's up? Izuku asked Aizawa. Momo grabbed the mic. And the last two students graduating from Class 3A. The new Pillars of Peace. Momo starts. Both Izuku and Ochako's eyes widen. Izuku Midoriya and Ochako Uraraka. The two look at each other, then back to Aizawa, who hands them their hero licenses. You guys will have to come back for normal classes, but as for hero work, you've proved yourself more than any training could, and I'm proud to be able to call myself your teacher. Even if it was for only a year. Aizawa smiled, which freaked the students out. Thank you. Izuku bowed down. Ochako just smiled as she cried. Give it up for them. Bakugo yelled, being even louder than the microphone. The crowd erupted into tears, and Izuku and Ochako looked at each other, tears flowing down both of their faces. Izuku, Ochako called, getting the boy's attention. Yeah? He asked her, and she dropped her crutches, surprising the boy. She fell into his arms and his eyes widened. Hug me, damn it, that hurt really bad to do, so at least make it worth it. Ochako laughed. Izuku smiled as the crowd got louder. It felt as if everything went silent, like they were the only two there. I love you, Izuku, and I've missed you more than you could imagine, Ochako whispers in his ear. Izuku blushes. I miss you too, Ochako. He pulls his head back and gets closer to her face. I love you. The two share a kiss and the curtain in front of them closes, ending the ceremony. Chapter 50. Tenko ran through the house with a Deku figurine in his hands. Boosh bam, the boy made his own sound effects. Tenko, stop playing with those, it's so childish. Eri told the boy, who frowned. But he's so cool, Tenko insisted while Eri walked over. I agree, but I think Ochako is cooler. Eri brings out an Ochako figure from behind her back. Tenko was now 11 years old, and Eri was 15. Over the last 6 years since the war, Tenko and Eri were as close as siblings. Only Tenko and Eri were technically siblings now. Kids, can you quiet down? I'm trying to sleep, Aizawa called to the two as he laid on the couch in his sleeping bag. But Uncle Aizawa, we're having fun, Tenko complains to the man. Fine, but just lower the volume a little bit. The man zipped up his sleeping bag. Okay, Tenko mumbled, disappointed. Don't worry, Tenko, Mom and Dad will be back soon. It's already 3 and their shift ends then. Eri smiles at her little brother while patting his head. Tenko smiles at the girl and nods, as if on cue. The door to the home opens. I'm home, Izuku called out, with Tenko immediately jumping up and running to Izuku, who kneeled down so the boy could run into his arms. Welcome home, Dad, the boy greeted his father while hugging him. Hey Tenko, were you good for Mr. Aizawa? Izuku asked the boy, who nods. They were good, don't worry, Midoriya, Aizawa says, appearing in front of the two with Eri by his side. He was sleeping, Eri snickered while Aizawa sighed. Rat, Aizawa mumbled, making Eri's eyebrows point up. Don't call me that, Eri said, annoyed while pointing to the man. Izuku chuckled as Tenko backed away. Ochako will be back in a few. She decided to run to the store, Izuku told the two kids, who nodded. Dad, Kota asked me to hang out, can I go? Eri asked the man, who nodded. Sure thing, he told the girl, who immediately smiled and pulled out her phone. Can I leave now? Aizawa asked Izuku, who laughed. Yes sir, you can, thanks for watching them. Izuku thanked the man, who nodded. I think they're old enough to take care of themselves, to be honest. Aizawa looked at Tenko, who was back to playing with the figurine of his father. You're right, but Eri here specifically asked me if he could have you watch them, Izuku admits to Aizawa, who looks over to Eri, who had a blush on her face. Dad, I told you not to tell him, the girl complained. The first 2 years Eri was free were spent by the side of Aizawa in Udate, so he was like a second father to her. She had a soft spot for him. Aizawa chuckled. Alright, I'll be going, see you later. Aizawa left the house and Eri looked over to Tenko. Well, I'm gonna go meet Kota, I'll see you guys later. Eri grabbed her bag and tried to run past Izuku, but he stopped her. Be home by 8 the latest, okay? You have the exams tomorrow and I don't want you to fail, Izuku told the girl, who nodded. He let her go and she sped away. He sighed and looked back to Tenko. Why can't you guys stay small forever? He asked the boy, who laughs. Don't worry, Dad, I'll always be your boy, Tenko told the man, who smiled. Thanks, Tenko. Izuku ruffled the boy's hair. Hey boys. Ochako walks into the home. Mommy, Tenko runs up and hugs the woman. Hey little man. Ochako hugged him back. When the two were 20, they officially adopted the 11-year-old Eri and 7-year-old Tenko. They got married at 22 and had been working as heroes while raising the kids. Izuku was the number 1 hero and Ochako the number 2. I saw Eri running out of here. She going to be with Kota? Ochako asked, with Izuku nodding. Think they're together? Ochako asked, making Izuku sigh. The thought of that makes me uncomfortable, Izuku admits while rubbing his head. Izuku, you gotta get over that. Remember, by this point at our age I already confessed to you. Ochako laughed to the boy. Yeah, honestly, I somehow admire your father even more for being able to handle letting go of his little girl. Izuku leans on the wall and Ochako smiles. I mean, tomorrow is her entrance exams for UA, whether we like it or not. She's growing up fast, Ochako says. The two had a habit of referring to the kids as if they were their biological kids. I know that's horrifying too. She's a talented girl, and I bet the support course would let her live up to her full potential, but I can't help but be scared. Izuku frowned a bit. It's not that I don't have faith in her, I just worry a lot, you know. Izuku vents to the woman, who nods. I get it. Ochako puts her hand on Izuku's shoulder. Don't worry guys, big sis is super smart, she'll do great. Tenko put his arm in the air with a huge smile on his face. Izuku and Ochako looked down to the boy and smiled. That's why I want to be a hero too, but I don't want to be a support course, I want to be in the hero course. Izuku's eyes widened. It sucks that I'm quirkless, but I know I can do it. Izuku looked over to Ochako, and Ochako got the memo. She nodded. Hey mom, hey dad. Tenko turned back to the two with his grin. He ran up to the two of them. Do you think I can be a hero even though I'm quirkless? Tenko's smile didn't let up. Izuku looked to Ochako, who nodded. Izuku kneeled down and out his hands on Tenko's shoulders. Izuku smiled as wide as he could. You can be a hero, I'm sure of it. The end.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.